Chapter 682. The moment the roof was blasted open by the swords, a dozen or so huge sword auras descended from the sky and knocked away the flying swords. They were like a dozen or so huge icicles that pierced into the numinous sky hall. Boom boom. The deafening sound masked the shrill cries of pain. The entire numinous sky hall began to tremble. Wood, stone, and debris flew in all directions. Smoke and dust rose and people flew everywhere in a daze. A few corpses were left in the hall, while the rest broke through the walls with their palms. At this critical moment, no one cared about the numinous sky hall. Saving their lives was the most important thing. Moreover, the numinous sky hall had already been destroyed by the enemy's attack. As soon as the people rushed out of the hall, they were struck by the fierce attacks from above. They did not even have the chance to see who the enemy was. They had to dodge the fatal attacks first. Not only the numinous sky hall, but the halls on the other two mountains were also being attacked crazily at the same time. The Daluo sect's consecration hall, in particular, had more than 100 people gathered in the sky. They struck out more than 100 sword auras and tore down the entire hall in an instant. The attack was so vicious and crazy that it was hard to imagine. It was as if they did not intend to give the enemy any chance to catch their breath. The moment the consecration hall collapsed, a dozen or so figures with angry roars exploded towards the attacking people in the sky. They instantly entered the crowd of people in the sky and engaged in a chaotic battle. In an instant, light shone in all directions, and loud rumbling sounds reverberated in the sky. Screams of pain could be heard and corpses continuously fell from the sky. "Get out of the way!" With a loud shout, the 100 or so people in the sky above the consecration hall dispersed. At the same time, a dozen or so figures charged towards the dozen or so people who rushed out from below. The two groups of experts at the end of the tribulation passing stage fiercely collided and fought crazily with no regard for their lives. The outcome of these dozen or so people was the key to the outcome of the entire battle. In the sky around Luoxiao Mountain, a dense crowd of people continuously swarmed over. The colors were black and white. Most of the people in black were men while the people in white were women. It was a very strange attack combination. "All disciples, fight!" Someone on top of Luoxiao Mountain roared furiously. Countless silhouettes shot out from the top of the mountain. No one knew where they came from, but they rushed towards the crowd that was besieging them. Soon, both sides started fighting crazily. The sea of clouds around Mount Luoxiao immediately started to churn, as if countless rocks had been thrown into a calm lake. The wind became stronger and a chaotic aura filled the air. Amidst the continuous rumbling, the entire Luoxiao Mountain seemed to be shaking. The beasts and birds at the foot of the mountain all stopped moving and looked up curiously. Suddenly, a corpse fell down at lightning speed. The cheerful stream splashed high waves with a bang. The smell of blood spread, and the stream was instantly mixed with dark red as it flowed down. Then the second and third corpses fell. Corpses fell everywhere, and the beasts and birds were so frightened that they fled in all directions. In the dense forest at the foot of the mountain, a large number of black-clothed and masked men had appeared out of nowhere. Only a pair of eyes could be seen as they quietly lurked in the wilderness. Xianxia silently stood on a big tree and looked up at the peak of the mountain. After seeing that the battle had already started, he expressionlessly waved his hand and pointed at Mount Luoxiao with force. Zhang Peng, who was staring at him under the tree, immediately turned around and ordered loudly after receiving the order, "Attack according to the original plan." In an instant, a dense group of black-clothed men suddenly appeared in the deep forest. With Mount Luoxiao as the center, they quickly surrounded it. Starting from the foot of Mount Luoxiao, they spread upwards in a three-dimensional manner, gradually shrinking the encirclement towards the Daluo sect at the peak of the mountain. This was an attack team made up of 6,000 members of Utopia. It was the largest combined attack of the Utopia army. The order the 6,000 Tribulation Transcendence experts received was, "Kill every disciple of the Daluo sect. Leave no one alive." "Lady Hua Yungu, it's you?" Luo Qingtian angrily raised his sword and pointed at the sky. The Daluo sect has no grudges with the Moon sect. Even if there were some small conflicts, there's no need to make such a big fuss. Why did you sneak attack the Daluo sect? He had already lost an arm. Now, with his messy clothes, the dignified leader of the Daluo sect looked extremely disheveled. The 6 elders stood with their backs to him. Until now, their expressions were still filled with panic and disbelief. Everything had happened so suddenly. In the blink of an eye, only 6 of the dozens of elders were left. The intensity of the battle was beyond their imagination. The Moon sect had actually sent more than 10 tribulation cultivators to sneak attack them. There were 7 in the final stage of the tribulation alone. The beautiful woman pointed at by the sword in the sky was the previous leader of the moon sect, Lady Huayangu. She was also Fairy Jade Flower's master. Lady Huayangu stared down coldly and said, "Leader Luo, don't you think it's too late to say this now? The moon sect isn't the only one targeting the Daluo sect. Why don't you take a good look first?" Luo Qingtian suddenly looked around and realized that the moon sect disciples in white were only targeting the Lingxiao Hall's mountain. The other two mountains were being attacked by a group of cultivators in black. Luo Qingtian's pupils constricted and he exclaimed, 10,000 demons. Then he suddenly stared at Lady Huayangu and shouted angrily, "The moon sect belongs to the righteous path. How dare you ally with the 10,000 demons to attack the Daluo sect? You deserve to die." "It's not the moon sect that deserves to die, it's the Daluo sect. Who told you to offend someone you shouldn't have? From today onwards, the Daluo sect will no longer exist in the cultivation world. The moon sect will become the second largest sect of the righteous path." A cold smile appeared on Lady Huayangu's face. It was an almost perverted smile. When it appeared on a woman's face, it was disgusting. Her expression was like that of a cat playing with a mouse. Suddenly, a cold voice came from afar. "Lady Hua, what are you talking about? Hurry up and take care of that side. Come and help. Finish the battle quickly. Don't be late." Huayangu turned to stare at a black-robed, silver-haired, and skinny old man in the middle of a fierce battle. She replied disdainfully, "Yan Wuchen, I know what to do. I don't need you to teach me. If you think you're no match for Luo Qingtian, why don't you say something? I'll definitely help you." Yan Wuchen sneered. He was about to speak when the elder in black who was fighting with him scolded, "Lady Hua, you bitch. How dare you collude with Yan Wuchen? You'll die a horrible death." This person was Luo Qingtian's master and the previous leader of the Daluo sect, Luo Guang. Boom. Yan Wuchen and Luo Guang fiercely collided. Their hair and robes shook violently. The two of them crossed their swords and blocked each other. Almost simultaneously, they quickly swung their palms towards each other. Bang! A deafening sound rang out. The two of them weren't shaken apart. Instead, their palms and fingers intertwined, grabbing each other. A powerful shockwave spread in all directions. The two of them were in a stalemate. From the twisted expressions on their faces, it could be seen that they were in a stalemate. It seemed like the difference in their cultivation wasn't that great. However, Yan Wuchen still forced a smile and laughed at his opponent. "Old man Luo, you actually dared to call Lady Huayangu a bitch? Hee. Good scolding, I like it." Luo Guang immediately spat, "Don't take pleasure in my misfortune. If you have the time, think about your son and grandson. I'm guessing they've already been torn to pieces. I'll wait and see. Let's see if you, Yan Wuchen, can still laugh after seeing your son die." The surrounding people were already in a mess. This group of old and experienced people were not willing to be at a disadvantage. Even their words were not to be outdone. On the other side, Lady Huayangu was already trembling in anger after being called a bitch by the two of them. When she calmed down, she immediately pointed at Luo Qingtian and the others and screamed, "Kill them, kill them!" Yan Wuchen's face darkened after hearing Luo Guang's words. He could no longer laugh. On the other hand, Luo Guang's expression changed because of Lady Huayangu's words. The two of them opened their eyes wide. A powerful shockwave exploded between them. Boom! The two of them were blasted away. Luo Guang's figure quickly rushed towards Lady Huayangu. He hurriedly shouted in the air, "All worshippers, follow me and protect the sect leader." In an instant, the 10 people who were fighting with the 10,000 demons all disregarded everything and chased after them. Naturally, the 10,000 demons would not let them go. They immediately chased after them. However, after chasing for a short distance, they stopped in the air again. They all looked back at Yan Wuchen, who was slowly flying towards them. They did not know what he meant by asking them to wait. Yan Wuchen flashed and joined the 10,000 demons who were in the late tribulation passing stage. He looked at Lady Huayangu and the others who were being forced into a panic. He secretly transmitted a message to his own people. "What's the hurry? The Daluo sect's defeat is already decided. If we can let the Daluo sect kill Lady Huayangu and the others before this, wouldn't that be even better? Surround them. Don't let them escape. We just need to prepare to clean up the final mess." The 10,000 demons who were in the late tribulation passing stage immediately understood Yan Wuchen's plan. They all looked at the former palace lord with admiration. He did not lose his head in the fierce battle and instantly grasped the most advantageous situation for the 10,000 demons. No wonder he was once the leader of the diabolism. Think about it. The Moon sect only had 7 people in the late tribulation passing stage, while the Deluo sect had 15. If the two sides continued to fight, the Moon sect would definitely suffer a great loss. The Deluo sect would also be fighting with their lives on the line. When the 10,000 demons cleaned up the mess, it would be even easier. In short, whether it was the destruction of the Deluo sect or the great loss of the Moon sect, it was a loss for the righteous path. On the other hand, the 10,000 demons and the diabolism had a great advantage. There were 18 people in the Moon sect. Among them, 11 were in the middle tribulation passing stage and 7 were in the late tribulation passing stage. Originally, it should have been easy to deal with the remaining 6 people. After all, there was not a single person in the late tribulation passing stage among the 6. However, in just a few words, the situation suddenly changed. No one expected the 15 Deluo sect's worshippers to counterattack. Chapter 683. By now, everyone could tell that the 10,000 demons were going easy on them. Huayungu's side was under a lot more pressure. It was the combined attack of 15 cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation. The 7 cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation of the Moon clan couldn't even protect themselves, let alone the other 11. The 11 women were immediately violently ravaged. Facing the joint attack of 15 cultivators at the end of the crossing tribulation stage, each of them perished. Huayungu almost vomited blood. She regretted not killing Luo Qingtian and the other 5 earlier. Now Yan Wuchen had taken advantage of her. As the previous leader of the Moon clan, Huayungu was definitely not stupid. She could see through Yan Wuchen's evil intentions, but so what? The cultivation world was full of deceit and danger could happen in an instant. She was useless if she couldn't guard against it. Huayungu looked over angrily. Yan Wuchen, who was wearing a black robe and had silver hair, was watching the fight with a smile. The 13 cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation also ignored the disciples of the 10,000 demons. Instead, they watched mockingly as the women were tortured by a group of people. The 11 women in the middle phase of the tribulation were no match for the 15 cultivators from the Daluo sect. They were all killed in the blink of an eye. Huayungu fought back with all her might. She yelled furiously, "Yan Wuchen! You're despicable! TSK 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 TSK." Yan Wuchen shook his head and laughed. "Huayungu, I meant well. You should appreciate it. Old Luo called you AB***, and even I can't stand it anymore. I'm giving you a chance to kill old Luo yourself. Sigh. I'm the despicable one now. Tell me, what's the point of this?" The last sentence was directed at the dozen cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation. Hearing this, more than a dozen people immediately looked up to the sky and laughed wildly, showing the arrogant demeanor of the demonic Tao. Huayungu was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. But she knew this wasn't the time to be impulsive. While fighting off the attacks of the 2 cultivators from the Daluo sect, she shouted, "Yan Wuchen, do you really want to watch? If you ruin Yu Qianzhou's plan, your 10,000 demons won't have a good ending either." Yan Wuchen surveyed his surroundings. He was confident that the final outcome would not be out of his control, and that it would not affect Yu Qianzhou's plans. He snorted coldly and said, "Huayungu, I know what to do. I don't need you to teach me. If you think that you're no match for old man Luo, you might as well tell me and I'll lend you a hand." He repeated Huayungu's words back to Huayungu, word for word. Without a doubt, he was telling Huayungu, "You were the one who was heartless first, so don't blame me for being unjust later." This sentence made Huayungu speechless. She did not expect retribution to come so quickly. The mention of Yu Qianzhou in their conversation shocked the people from the Daluo sect. They vaguely guessed the reason why the 10,000 demons had joined forces with the Moon sect. It seemed that Yu Qianzhou was here for revenge. Luo Qingtian, who was surrounded and protected by the 6 elders, had a look of determination in his eyes. He immediately sent a message to the 15 masters who were attacking fiercely. "Masters, it's enough to trap the people from the Moon sect, but don't kill them. The turning point of the Daluo sect today lies with the people from the Moon sect." As the leader of the Daluo sect, he spoke. The fierce attacks of the 15 cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation passing stage from the Daluo sect eased up. Luo Qingtian looked at the 15 consecrators fighting fiercely and sighed with emotion in his heart. The reason why a big sect could become a big sect was because of the existence of these mainstays. Every time there was a big change, the sect could be supported and not fall. Had it not been for the support of these 15 elders, the Grand Immortal sect would have already collapsed, let alone his own life. Huayungu's group of 7 naturally felt that their opponents' attacks had weakened. It seemed that they did not want to kill them. This made the 7 secretly feel strange. They even suspected that there was a bigger conspiracy behind this. Could it be that they wanted to capture them alive? Yan Wuqian's eyes narrowed. He also saw that something was wrong. The 13 masters in the last phase of the tribulation passing stage from the 10,000 demons were also surprised. They all saw something strange. But they could not figure out what the Daluo sect was up to. Luo Qingtian, who looked a little disheveled, now had the heroic spirit of a leader. He shouted loudly, "Huaiyanggu, you and I belong to the righteous path. We should not fight to the death. If we continue to fight, it will only benefit the demons. It will be the righteous path that will suffer losses. I believe that the moon sect was bewitched by others. Now that we are both in a critical situation, why don't we join hands and fight against the demons together? As long as we can defeat the 10,000 demons together today, I, Luo Qingtian, as the leader of the Daluo sect, swear that I will not pursue the matter of the moon sect attacking the Daluo sect. I will pretend that this never happened. Huaiyanggu, what do you think?" As soon as he said this, the 3 masters were shocked. The faces of the 10,000 demons changed. The Daluo sect already had one more master in the last phase of the tribulation passing stage than the 10,000 demons. Plus, they were fighting on the territory of the Daluo sect. The reason why they attacked the Daluo sect this time was that the moon sect was willing to send 7 masters in the last phase of the tribulation passing stage. That was why they had the confidence to win. If the 7 masters from the moon sect turned against them, and the 15 from the Daluo sect joined hands, the 10,000 demons would definitely lose. Yan Wuqian looked at Luo Qingtian with a complicated expression. He secretly admired him. Luo Qingtian was indeed the leader of the Daluo clan. He was able to let go at the most critical moment. So many elders of the Moon clan had been killed, but he was still able to calm down and deal with the situation calmly. He was able to let go of the blood feud so easily. The 15 masters from the Daluo sect immediately understood Luo Qingtian's intention. They knew that the dead could not come back to life. Protecting the Daluo sect was their top priority. The leader's decision was right. Luo Guang looked at his disciple with relief and said loudly, "Huaiyanggu, we will follow the leader's order. What do you think? I hope you can make a decision quickly." His words contained a hint of support for Luo Qingtian, but there was also a hint of a threat to Huaiyanggu. Huaiyanggu hesitated. She believed Luo Qingtian's words, but how was she going to explain it to Yu Qianzhou? When the moon sect received news from Hua Rui from Hat Island, they also hesitated whether to join hands with the 10,000 demons to attack the Daluo sect. After a closed-door analysis by the higher-ups of the moon sect, they felt that the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. First, Yu Qianzhou promised to help the moon sect when the soul formation cultivators from other countries threatened the moon sect. Second, after killing the Daluo sect, the moon sect would naturally become the second largest sect of the righteous path. This was the secret desire of the moon sect for many years. Third, after destroying the Daluo sect, Yu Qianzhou promised not to take any of the Daluo sect's wealth. The moon sect and the 10,000 demons would split it among themselves. As for the fourth condition, Yu Qianzhou threatened that since the moon sect already knew the secret, if they didn't agree he would take care of the moon sect. The moon sect had no choice but to agree. But now, Huaiyanggu really hesitated. If they joined hands with the Daluo sect, they would offend Yu Qianzhou. If they didn't, the 10,000 demons' actions were too infuriating. They had caused the deaths of 11 cultivators from the moon sect. Just then Yan Wuqian chuckled awkwardly. He didn't expect to shoot himself in the foot. He said loudly, "Huaiyanggu, we're even now. Don't fall for other people's tricks. Now you and I will continue to work together and destroy the Daluo sect. What do you think?" The 10,000 demons and the Daluo sect all became alert. The moon sect's decision could decide the outcome of the battle. "Hey, who are they?" One of the 10,000 demons suddenly pointed at the masked men in black who were about to reach the other 2 mountains. If one didn't pay attention, they would think that they were from the 10,000 demons because they were all dressed in black. But these people all had their faces covered. They obviously weren't from the 10,000 demons. But the strange thing was that these masked men didn't target the 10,000 demons. They only targeted the Daluo sect disciples. The people from the Daluo sect looked over and their expressions changed. Luo Qingtian frowned. He felt a deep sense of danger. The masked men in black didn't attack quickly, but they cooperated with each other very well. They surrounded the Daluo sect disciples layer by layer. They would rather slow down than let a single Daluo sect disciple go. The Daluo sect disciples couldn't resist at all. As soon as they collided with them, they were immediately killed. Such a strict and brutal fighting style that left no survivors, and the flawless coordination, was a ghastly sight to behold. The most frightening thing was that these masked men were all at the early stage of tribulation passing. Occasionally, a Daluo sect disciple in the middle stage of tribulation passing would be surrounded and killed by more than a dozen masked men. Even a Daluo sect disciple in the middle stage of tribulation passing couldn't stop them. Obviously, without a top expert to stop them, the Daluo sect disciples could only wait to be slaughtered. However, the Daluo sect's top experts in the late stage of tribulation passing were all trapped here. They couldn't go over to help. They could only watch as the black net closed in. Yan Wuchen looked at it and was stunned at first. Then he laughed and said, "Needless to say, Yu Qianshou has arranged for a third party. It seems that Yu Qianshou is determined to win." He was relieved now. In such a situation, if Huayangu was not stupid, she would naturally know what to do. Huayangu only took a few glances and was shocked. She didn't expect Yu Qianshou to have a backup plan. She didn't know if there were any other arrangements. Fortunately, she didn't agree to the Daluo sect's request. She rolled her eyes and shouted, "Yan Wuchen, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and attack." The meaning of this sentence was obvious. Luo Guang immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. "Huayangu, you old bitch. I won't forgive you." His figure shot out and a palm shadow with the force of a mountain shot towards Huayangu. The shockwave swept out like a hurricane. Even the other late-stage tribulation passing experts had to retreat and hurriedly move out of the way. The Daluo mountain-splitting palm was a palm that Luo Guang had used all his cultivation in a fit of rage. Its power was so ferocious that even Luo Guang couldn't measure it. He hated Huayangu for her fickleness. Earlier, he had shown her mercy, hoping that she would change sides. He didn't expect that by sparing her life, his side would fall into a desperate situation. Chapter 684. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have had high hopes for this bitch. He would have killed her as soon as possible. This angry palm seemed to have the intention of taking Huayangu's life back. Huayangu was shocked. She didn't expect Luo Guang's palm to be so powerful. She knew she couldn't block it and wanted to teleport away, but it was too late. Bang! A heavy palm landed on Huayangu's disappearing figure. Teleportation was no longer possible. Huayangu's entire body was sent flying. She coughed up a mouthful of blood while in midair. She had misjudged and was seriously injured. If she had fought back forcefully, even if she couldn't block it, she wouldn't be so badly injured. After all, the difference in cultivation between them wasn't too great. They were both experts of the same level. She had chosen to escape, but she hadn't. It was equivalent to being hit by the palm. Yen Bugue was shocked at first, but then a strange smile appeared on his face. The Daluo sect was already attacking the 7 from the Moon Clan, but he didn't give the order for the 10,000 demons to attack. The 10 or so experts from the 10,000 demons looked at each other and didn't do anything. They understood that the palace master still wanted to kill them with a borrowed knife. "Clan master!" The remaining people from the Moon Clan cried out. But they were all in danger and couldn't spare a hand to save Huayangu. In his anger, Luo Guang swore to kill Huayangu. He dashed forward and chased after Huayangu. Facing the body that had lost the ability to move in the air, he struck out with his palm again. The heaven-shaking palm struck out with a momentum that could destroy everything. It really had the power to split a mountain. Huayangu was seriously injured and had lost the ability to defend herself. If this palm hit her again, she would definitely be chopped into pieces. But at this moment, a figure suddenly dashed up from the foot of the mountain. That person seemed to be shocked when he jumped out. He looked at the person in his arms in disbelief. Why did a beautiful woman come to him? That was too much. Damn. Daluo mountain splitting palm. That person let out a strange cry. He suddenly noticed the huge palm-shaped astral image that was coming at him. Since he could call out its name, it was obvious that this was not his first time coming into contact with the Daluo mountain splitting palm. At the same time as he let out a strange cry, he had already waved his sleeves. A dense mass of black light flashed out, directly shooting towards the incoming palm silhouette. Hiss hiss hiss. The dense mass of black light emitted a sound similar to that of a sharp blade cutting through paper. The palm silhouette collapsed with a loud rumble, causing waves of chi to surge out in all directions. The Daluo mountain splitting palm was instantly broken. Luo Guang, who was chasing after him, was shocked. He quickly stopped in his tracks and looked at the young man in front of him in shock. He could not imagine that his palm attack would be broken so easily. This person was none other than Yu Qianshou, who came up from the foot of the mountain. Coincidentally, he caught Huayangu, who had been sent flying, the moment he arrived. It was also Huayangu's good fortune that he had saved her. Old thing, how dare you sneak attack me? Yu Qianzhou hugged Huayangu with one arm. His face was gloomy. The black flying sword returned to his sleeve. Who are you? Luo Guang asked cautiously. Luo Qingtian recognized Yu Qianzhou at a glance. The two of them had fought before, and his broken arm was thanks to Yu Qianzhou. Naturally, Luo Qingtian had a deep impression of Yu Qianzhou. Zhu Xianxian, who was lucky enough to survive, also had a deep impression of him. Zhu Xianxian's pupils shrank as he shouted, "Honored Elder Luo, this person is Yu Qianzhou, the one who has always been against our Daluo sect. He is also the mastermind behind this sneak attack on our Daluo sect." Listening to his words, it was obvious that he was encouraging Luo Guang to kill Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou swept a cold glance at Zhu Xianxian and sneered, "Old dog, you're really lucky to still be alive. I hope you'll continue to be lucky today and leave this place alive." "You're Yu Qianzhou?" Luo Guang pointed in all directions and shouted angrily, "You're the mastermind behind the attack on my Daluo sect." Yu Qianzhou shook his head indifferently and said, "I'm not the mastermind behind the attack on your Daluo sect, but the mastermind behind the extermination of your Daluo sect." Extermination. His words were cold. In fact, he had been preparing for this day for a long time and had been looking forward to it for a long time. Before coming here, he had stored up enough blue fire and black fire elements in his body to put an end to this matter once and for all. This was a knot in his heart that he could not forget, and he had to end it. Luo Guang looked around and saw the Daluo sect disciples falling one by one. The masked men in black seemed to be afraid that the fallen Daluo sect disciples would not die a complete death, so they did not forget to kill them. This was a blatant bloodbath. Haha. Luo Guang suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed until tears streamed down his face. In his heart, he had a vague feeling that the Daluo sect would not have a tomorrow. He knew that there was no such thing as an everlasting sect in this world, but he never thought that this day would befall the Daluo sect so suddenly, without any warning. After laughing bitterly, he waved his sword and said, "All right, I heard that the #1 expert below the soul formation stage has appeared in Huaxia's cultivation world. Today I'd like to experience it for myself." The flying sword in his hand turned into a silver rainbow and shot toward Yu Qianzhou with a shocking aura. He waved his palms and chased after the flying sword, breaking through the wind and shooting out. One man and one sword attacked in a frenzy that complemented each other. "You're overestimating yourself." Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly. Yan Wuqian and the other experts of the 10,000 demons stared at the scene unblinkingly. Luo Qingtian and the others also held their breaths and watched with rapt attention. They all wanted to see what kind of ability this rumored #1 expert below the soul formation stage had to be able to cause such a huge commotion among the many powerful experts in the various countries. Before the sword arrived, the strong wind was already surging toward them. Yu Qianzhou was unfazed in the face of all this, and he was still holding the unconscious Huayangu in one arm. Suddenly he narrowed his eyes slightly. While facing the aggressive wind, he quickly swung his other arm, and two of his fingers brazenly flicked at the silver arc that was charging at him. Ding! A crisp sound rang out, and the flying sword temporarily stopped in the air. The powerful airflow that the flying sword had condensed instantly collapsed and exploded in a chaotic manner. The flying sword disappeared, and all that could be seen was silver dust dancing in the air, swirling chaotically along with the chaotic airflow. Yan Wuqian and the others' eyes widened, and their mouths gaped so wide that an egg could fit inside. Their faces were filled with disbelief. In that instant just now, the flying sword had actually been shattered into dust by Yu Qianzhou's two fingers. Oh my god! Just how powerful was his cultivation? No wonder he was the #1 expert below the soul formation stage whose name shook the world. Just how powerful would a true soul formation stage cultivator be? Everyone began to ask themselves this question. Thinking about the terrifying scene of a soul formation expert descending upon the cultivation world of Huaxia, everyone felt a chill run down their spines. Hi! Luo Guang sped up and shot over. Not only did the flying sword's fate not scare him, but it also made him rush over even faster. Things seemed a little strange. Because Yu Qianzhou was facing the charging Luo Guang, he could see the expression on Luo Guang's face better than anyone else. Seeing the generous smile on Luo Guang's face, he suddenly remembered the expression on Yin Baikong's face before he self-destructed his Dantian in the cornucopia. The two of them had almost the same smile. Yu Qianzhou's pupils constricted, and the words "self-destruct his Dantian" flashed through his mind. In his shock, the two fingers that were still hanging in the air after shattering the flying sword quickly turned into palms and faced Luo Guang. Bang! A soft explosion sounded from Luo Guang's body. A cloud of white mist exploded and enveloped Luo Guang's entire body. The white mist was sucked into Yu Qianqiu's palms, and Luo Guang, who appeared from the white mist, shocked everyone. Even the experts of the Daluo sect and Moon clan who were fighting in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage stopped in shock. They had taken time to pay attention to what was going on, and in the end they saw a scene that they shouldn't have seen. Luo Guang's old but strong body instantly became as thin as a piece of firewood. He had already lost the momentum of charging forward, and all that was left was inertia. Yu Qianqiu casually waved his hand, and a gust of wind that was not very powerful blew him into the air. It was a very strange scene. The body that was floating in the air seemed to be very light, as if it had fallen apart in the air, and a pile of things fell from it. When the body completely fell to the ground, it seemed like there was nothing inside the clothes. A shriveled head with skin and 2 black holes in its eye sockets rolled out with a gurgling sound. A crack suddenly appeared in the skull, and it split into 2 pieces, shaking non-stop on the ground. A gust of wind blew over, and the 2 pieces of skulls, along with a large pile of things on the ground, were blown away. A few pieces of clothes floated in the air. Such a strange scene caused everyone to be dumbfounded. Their expressions were indescribable as they swallowed their saliva with great difficulty. The experts of the Daluo sect couldn't help but look around, shaking their heads. Did Luo Guang disappear just like that? In the end, everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu with fear in their eyes. They had never heard of such a method of killing, and the sight of it was horrifying. Right now Yu Qianqiu was like a devil in their eyes. As for the women of the Moon sect, they looked at Huayangu, who was still in Yu Qianqiu's hands, and couldn't help but shiver. They were afraid that Huayangu would accidentally disappear like Luo Guang. It took Yu Qianqiu a while to regain his composure. It was too dangerous just now. If he didn't react in time, Luo Guang would have successfully detonated his dantian. Then he would have been out of luck. Although Luo Guang's cultivation was not as high as Yin Baikong's, if he exploded his dantian, he would probably not be able to withstand it. He slowly put down his outstretched hand and coldly snorted, "Do you have nothing better to do? You actually want to explode your dantian? You must be tired of living." As soon as he said that, everyone was reminded. Everyone immediately remembered the strange scene of Luo Guang speeding forward. It turned out that he wanted to explode his dantian and perish together with Yu Qianqiu. Exploding one's dantian. This was a way to die with both body and soul destroyed. The people of the Daluo sect felt lost. It was hard to imagine how the old sect leader could think of such a way to perish together with the enemy. Such a tragic way to die. Could it be that the old sect leader had already lost the confidence to win, and wanted to perish together with the enemy? Zhu Xianxian avoided Yu Qianqiu's stare in fear, and an uncontrollable fear lingered on his face. He had offended Yu Qianqiu several times, and never thought that Yu Qianqiu would let him go. Now that he saw Luo Guang die in such a horrifying way, his back was already drenched in cold sweat. Chapter 685. The strongest cultivator below the soul formation stage. Yan Wuchen looked at Yu Qianqiu and sighed in his heart. If only he could pull Yu Qianqiu into the 10,000 demons. What a pity. Master. The white-browed Luo Qingtian sighed and knelt on the ground. After kowtowing 3 times, he suddenly stood up and pointed his sword at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu, the Daluo sect may have had some grudges with you, but that doesn't mean that you have to kill my entire sect. I can let you go if you kill my only son, but why are you so ruthless? Yu Qianqiu waved at a late-stage tribulation cultivator from the Moon sect and pointed at the unconscious Huayangu in his arms. The woman quickly took Huayangu from him. The other 5 also flashed over to help Huayangu heal her injuries. Yu Qianqiu's appearance was equivalent to saving their lives. Sect leader Luo, Yu Qianqiu stared at him and said indifferently, "You are a man of your word. I have always admired you. But you're not a good father, nor are you a good sect master. Whether it's your son or the disciples of the exalted sect, you haven't done your duty to discipline and restrain them. This is the root cause of the destruction of the Daluo sect. The grudge between me and the Daluo sect was formed when I first entered the cultivation world and was still in Onquangsung. It has nothing to do with the grudges you mentioned." Onquangsung? Luo Qingtian's eyes flickered for a while and he said in a deep voice, "Although you Yu Qianqiu are famous now when you were in the Blue Light sect, I'm afraid no one in the Daluo sect knows who you are. Is there a need for our Daluo sect to make enemies with a disciple who has never even left the sect?" "Well said." Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and snorted coldly, "Then I'll let you die in peace. May I ask if sect leader Luo still remembers the Onquangsung elder, Hao Sansi, who was killed by you for stealing the seven-colored Ganoderma. Xianxia? Luo Qingtan frowned slightly and muttered, I do have an impression of the rainbow Lingji. As for the injured person, is he called Xianxia? The last question was directed at the person beside him. One of the elders guarding him nodded and said, That's right, I have an impression of this matter. That elder Ong Kwangtsung who died from his injuries was indeed called Xianxia. At that time, the two of them had met on the way back from the New Excellence Assembly and had gotten into an argument over a rainbow Lingji. The person who had injured him was Elder Zhu. However, this matter has already been settled by the Cultivation Alliance, and Ong Kwangtsung is willing to reconcile. Many sects know about this. Luo Qingtian nodded slightly and stared at Yu Qianqiu. Since this matter has already been settled with Ong Kwangtsung and Ong Kwangtsung is no longer pursuing it, why are you bringing it up again? What does this matter have to do with you? Yu Qianqiu didn't reply to him. Instead, he stared straight at Zhu Xianxian and asked with narrowed eyes, Zhu Xianxian, the person who injured Xianxia was you? Hearing this question, Zhu Xianxian already had a bad feeling. He looked at the talkative elder with some resentment and forced himself to calm down. That's right, the person who injured Xianxia was me. However, that was also because he stole the seven-colored Ganoderma that our Daluo sect found first. Am I supposed to let him take it and not do anything? As soon as this was said, even the Daluo sect's people were silent. They could hear the loophole in his words. Yan Wuchen, who was watching from the side, laughed. That's interesting. If I remember correctly, most of the elders in Ong Kwangtsung are nascent soul cultivators. A nascent soul cultivator robbing a tribulation-passing cultivator's thing is really courting death. Moreover, who would believe that a mere Ong Kwangtsung dared to rob the Daluo sect's thing? I'm blinded by greed. What wouldn't I dare to do? Zhu Xianxian continued to defend himself. Blinded by greed? Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow and asked indifferently, Elder Zhu, do you know what's the relationship between Xianxia and me? Here comes the problem. The Daluo sect's people suddenly looked over. This was probably the key to why Yu Qianqiu had mobilized so many people to wipe out the Daluo sect. Yan Wuchen was not surprised. The 10,000 demons had received news from Qiu Weiyuan, and the Moon sect had also received news from Huarui. Yu Qianqiu had already told the two sects clearly, so they both knew the relationship between Yu Qianqiu and Xianxia. Zhu Xianxian's heart was pounding. He didn't even have the courage to ask. Yu Qianqiu said coldly, word by word, Xianxia is Ong Kwangtsung's master after I entered the cultivation world. I am his only disciple. He participated in the new talent assembly for me. His only goal was to fight for a foundation establishment pill for me, a disciple that everyone thinks is useless. Who knew that on the way back, he would coincidentally pick a seven-colored Ganoderma that brought him a fatal disaster. However, the sect that killed him for the treasures had instead framed him. At that time, I knelt in front of his corpse and swore that I would definitely wipe out the sect that killed him, leaving not a single chicken or dog alive. Do you know the reason now? Zhu Xianxian's face was pale and sweat appeared on his forehead. It was true that he had evil intentions when he saw the treasure. Plus, he didn't take Ong Kwangtsung seriously. That was why he killed him for the treasure. He didn't expect to cause so much trouble. After hearing this, the Daluo sect people all looked at each other. Didn't he just kill an elder of Ong Kwangtsung? They didn't expect that the root cause of the Daluo sect's destruction was this. Given the Daluo sect's status in the cultivation world, even if Ong Kwangtsung still existed, he wouldn't take it seriously. Who would have thought that a disciple who had been expelled from a destroyed sect would actually swear to raise the Daluo sect to the ground 20 years ago? If anyone had heard those words back then, they would have taken it as a joke. Who would have believed them? Yan Wuchen looked at the Daluo sect people, who didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Then he looked at Yu Qianqiu and was speechless. This kid was really persistent. He actually worked so hard for something like this. That vow was a joke to everyone back then. He didn't expect it to be true. Yan Wuchen looked around. It seemed that the Daluo sect was on the verge of destruction. The sounds of fighting at the foot of the mountain were getting closer and closer to the peak. Under the strong attacks of the 10,000 demons, the Moon sect, and the masked men in black, the Daluo sect disciples suffered heavy losses. They could no longer resist and were forced to retreat to the top of the mountain. More and more people gathered at the top of the mountain. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the people of the Daluo sect and suddenly stared at Yan Wuchen. His face darkened. He squinted and said, Senior Yan, why did I see the masters of the Moon sect fighting with their lives when I just came up? Are you guys just watching a show? Yan Wuchen's old face became awkward because he was accidentally seen by someone. He immediately explained, "Yu Qianshou, you misunderstood. It's not what you see." As he spoke, he suddenly glanced at the masters of the 10,000 demons in the late stage of the tribulation and said sternly, "The Moon sect led the Daluo sect into our encirclement. Now it's time for us to attack. Go." With that, Yan Wuchen took the lead and rushed over. The dozen masters immediately followed him and attacked. This time the 10,000 demons didn't hold back. In addition, Luo Guang had already died in the hands of Yu Qianshou. Both sides had 14 masters in the late stage of the tribulation against 14. One side wanted to perform well in front of Yu Qianshou, while the other side wanted to stay alive. In an instant, the battle between the two sides became white-hot. Chapter 686. Yu Qianshou didn't interfere with the fight. Instead, he slowly flew into the sky and observed the situation below silently. The fighting area on Luoshao Mountain was shrinking. Under the pressure of the three forces, it was like a fish net that was gradually closing. 8 out of 10 Daluo sect disciples on Luoshao Mountain had died. The remaining 20% were fighting desperately, but they were still retreating. These 20% were naturally the elite disciples of the Daluo sect. However, they had already retreated to the top of the mountain and had nowhere else to retreat. Many wanted to escape, but the masked men in black followed closely behind the 10,000 demons and the Moon sect. They were like a filter. Air could pass, but humans couldn't. Anyone who wanted to escape from Luoshao Mountain would be killed. Since they were going to die either way, they might as well fight. In their grief and anger, the Daluo sect disciples unleashed their powerful combat abilities. Under the heavy siege, they actually showed signs of counterattacking. Killing one was enough, killing two was more than enough, and killing two was more than enough. These people were the elite disciples of the Daluo sect and had strong combat abilities. Once they fought without any regard for their lives, they immediately caused a lot of damage to the 10,000 demons and the Moon sect. They actually broke through the heavy siege of the 10,000 demons and the Moon sect several times, but the masked men in black at the outermost perimeter were too strong. Aside from their flawless combination attacks, a few Daluo sect disciples who were at the tribulation stage would often be attacked by dozens of masked men in black as soon as they broke out of the encirclement. These dozens of people were all experts at the tribulation stage. That scene was like a bubble that had just been blown out, and then it was punctured by someone in an instant. Those who broke through were almost instantly killed on the spot. They didn't even have a chance to fight back. The sounds of fighting and angry roars echoed on Luoshao Mountain. Luo Qingtian looked around with sorrow. The mountain was filled with the corpses of the Daluo sect disciples. The entire mountain was covered in corpses and blood flowed like a river. Almost the entire mountain was dyed red. It was so red that it was glaring and shocking. Under the active treatment of the Moon sect, Huayangu finally woke up from her coma. Her injuries were very serious, and her internal organs were severely damaged. It was impossible for her to recover in a short period of time, let alone participate in another battle. Someone beside her told her how Yu Qianshou saved her. Huayangu's eyes searched for the proud figure in the air. She helped one of them stand up stubbornly and said to the other 5, "Who said that women are not as good as men? Go help the 10,000 demons finish the battle. Don't let these stinky men look down on the women of the Moon clan." Yes. The 5 women immediately accepted the order and quickly joined the battle. With the addition of these 5 late-stage tribulation transcendence experts, the morale of Yan Wuchen and the others soared. Meanwhile, the pressure on the Daluo sect's side multiplied, and the situation worsened rapidly. The 5 women did not split up to attack. Instead, the 5 of them joined forces to help the master of the 10,000 demons. 6 of them were at the final stage of the crossing calamity stage, so the result was obvious. Not long after, the Daluo sect's late-stage tribulation transcendence expert was dismembered with a miserable howl. The 6 of them quickly joined forces and moved on to the next target. The death of the late-stage tribulation transcendence expert was a heavy blow to the Daluo sect, both in terms of strength and mentality. The Daluo sect's decline was imminent. Luo Qingqian's tiger-like eyes were filled with tears under his white eyebrows. He shouted loudly, "Masters, quickly break out of the encirclement. Don't worry about us. As long as the Daluo sect still has you, it will have a chance to rise again. After breaking out of the encirclement, quickly go to the coast of the East Sea and meet up with Luo Kuan and the other 4 masters. The Daluo sect's blood feud will depend on you." The 6 elders who were protecting him quickly raised their swords. They all knew what the sect leader meant. Now was the time to fight for their lives. However, Zhu Xianxian's face was pale. He glanced at Yu Qianshou from time to time, only to find that Xianxia was also staring at him coldly. The hand holding the sword was actually trembling slightly. One of the Deluo sect's masters who was fighting immediately shouted back excitedly, "As a dignified disciple of the Deluo sect, how can I abandon the sect leader and escape? Sect leader, leave quickly. We old bones will cover you." Luo Qingtian waved his arm and stabbed his sword into the ground. A black light flashed from his storage bag, and a black token appeared in his hand. The words, "Deluo sect token," were engraved on the cloud patterns. Luo Qingtian shouted angrily, "The sect leader's token is here. Everyone in the Deluo sect, listen to my decree. As the Deluo sect leader, I issue a decree. Masters of the Deluo sect, quickly break out of the encirclement. All disciples of the Deluo sect, listen to my order. Cover the old masters at all costs to break out of the encirclement." Furious roars reverberated through the mountain peak, followed by a chorus of angry shouts. Yes, sect master's decree. The Deluo sect disciples, who had been fighting to the death, suddenly turned around and charged toward the battle between the dozens of late-stage tribulation transcendence experts on the mountain peak. In the face of death, there was no need to think about anything else. Luo Qingtian's words completely ignited their courage to fight for their dignity. Even the sect leader was willing to risk his life. They only had the thought of fighting with their lives on the line. Although there were less than 3,000 Deluo sect disciples protecting the masters, they were the most elite disciples of the Deluo sect. Their combat power was quite strong. The fact that they could last until now under the joint attack of the three forces was the best proof. This bloody battle had already given them the greatest glory. They were indeed the backbone of the Deluo sect and the elite disciples of the Deluo sect. These people surged forward crazily and worked together with the masters of the Deluo sect. They immediately caused a lot of trouble for Yan Wuqian and the others. After killing a few dozens or even hundreds of people rushed at them. Coupled with the help of the masters of the Deluo sect, they were even forced to the point where they were not far from death. The situation was instantly reversed. However, the 10,000 demons and the disciples of the Moon sect naturally could not watch their masters be in danger. The elder in charge of the battle of the 10,000 demons waved his sword and roared, "Kill! Destroy the Deluo sect! Kill!" The figures in black swarmed forward. The elder in charge of the battle of the Moon sect was not inferior to the men. She pointed her sword at the Deluo sect and shouted in a sharp voice, "Kill! Kill! Kill!" The white figures swarmed forward. Zhang Peng looked around the battlefield and quickly gestured to the leaders in all directions to shrink the encirclement. The battle instantly became a mess. The most intense battle was concentrated on the Ling Shao Hall's mountain from the three mountains. It was a tragic scene. The masked men in black calmly formed an encirclement. The encirclement pushed forward step by step, and the space between them also shrank. Yu Qianqiu gazed at the fierce battle below and spread his arms expressionlessly. Black lights continuously flashed in his sleeves. 2,000 flying swords made of black flames danced in the air, staring at the battle below like a tiger watching its prey. This was the first time he had displayed so many black flame flying swords in public. It was clear that he was determined to destroy the Deluo sect. Seeing the most elite disciples of the Deluo sect fall one by one, Luo Qingtian and the others clenched their teeth with tears in their eyes. It should be known that the Deluo sect had spent a lot of manpower, resources, and financial resources to cultivate these disciples. But today they were certain that it was all worth it. It was even far from enough. They felt sorry for these disciples who fell one by one. It was too tragic. The 6 elders who were protecting Luo Qingtian burst into tears and cried silently. Even Zhu Xianxian was no exception. He closed his eyes and let the hot tears slide down his face. Right now, there was only endless regret in his heart. He regretted being too greedy in the past and causing irreparable losses to the sect. Elders, let's go. Break out of the encirclement. I beg you, don't let the blood of the Deluo sect disciples be shed in vain. Luo Qingtian screamed at the sky. He suddenly pulled out his sword from the ground and shouted in sorrow, "Kill!" He rushed into the battle first. The 6 elders also roared loudly, "Kill!" Without hesitation, they charged into the fray and began to fight. The Deluo sect's elder who refused to leave took the time to wipe away the tears on his face. He shouted in a trembling voice, "Brothers, let's go. Let's break out." The 13 tearful elders of the Deluo sect burst into a sorrowful roar, "Hi!" Disregarding everything else, they rushed together and formed a sharp sword that soared into the sky. They directly tore a hole in the crowd and pierced through the sky. "Where do you think you're going?" Yan Wuchen shouted anxiously and quickly chased after them. His eyes were red from killing. However, at this moment hundreds of Deluo sect disciples rushed out from all directions and filled the hole created by the 13 elders. They desperately blocked Yan Wuchen and the others who were chasing after them. Yan Wuchen and the 5 experts of the 10,000 demons at the end of the tribulation passing stage worked together to form a sword net. Bang, bang, bang. Blood splattered everywhere. Dozens of Deluo sect disciples were immediately killed by the swords. The hole was once again opened. However, before Yan Wuchen and the others could rush out, another group of Deluo sect disciples swung their swords at them without any regard for their lives. Regardless of the huge gap in cultivation between the two sides, they forcefully blocked the hole once more. Although the Deluo sect disciples had risked their lives to give the 13 revered elders a chance to escape the encirclement, there was still a group of black-clothed men staring at them, especially Xianxia, who was waiting with his sword. The moment the 13 elders rushed into the sky, the 2,000 black fire flying swords quickly adjusted their blades and aimed at them. Xianxia sneered. "Let's see where you can run to." Before he finished speaking, the black fire flying swords instantly moved. Whoosh 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 whoosh. A dense rain of black light came down on them. The net of swords was so dense that it cut off the space for the elders to teleport away, unless they teleported back down. However, that was impossible. The Deluo sect had paid such a heavy price to let them break out of the encirclement. There was no way they could run back and tangle with Yan Wuchen and the others. The Deluo sect didn't have that many people to sacrifice. In an instant, stellar energy shields, astral swords, and the Deluo mountain-splitting palm tore through the air. The 13 elders could only hope to open up another hole to escape. Unfortunately, they encountered the black fire flying swords. Stellar energy shields, astral swords, and the Deluo mountain-splitting palm were their nemesis. The black fire flying swords cut through them as easily as paper. Chapter 687. Break, break, break. All the obstacles were so fragile. The black light that resembled a meteor shower glided past, and the sky suddenly became quiet. Many people subconsciously looked up. The 13 figures had lost their momentum and fell slowly. The black meteor shower that pierced through them stopped silently. The swords turned around and sped up, flying back into the sky again. The 13 figures trembled in the air and were turned into sieves again. Blood rained down and the 13 figures fell quickly. Xianxia stared down expressionlessly. The black light that flew back into the sky seemed to have completed its mission and returned to his sleeves like a swarm of locusts. "No!" Luo Qingtian roared in grief. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the 13 figures falling down. Suddenly he felt a chill in his chest. He slowly looked down and realized that his chest had been pierced by the flying swords of the 10,000 demons' nascent soul disciples due to his momentary lapse in concentration. Blood continued to gush out of the wound. All the Daluo sect disciples stared at the 13 figures falling down, and their faces instantly turned deathly pale. They suddenly felt that all the sacrifices and hard work had lost their meaning in that instant. The Daluo sect disciples were dazed, but the 10,000 demons and moon sect disciples who were in a frenzy of killing wouldn't show any mercy. For them, this was the best opportunity to kill their enemies and avenge their fellow sect members. How could they let it go? They almost didn't hesitate to kill. The flowing light dragged by the flying swords intertwined like a net, piercing through and bringing out bright red blood lotuses. The Daluo sect disciples who had persisted until now, the most elite disciples of the Daluo sect, trembled under the attacks of the flying swords. Some people fell on the spot. However, some people clenched their teeth and didn't fall because they really couldn't accept it. Blood gushed out like a fountain, and their clothes were already soaked in blood. Those people just held on and refused to fall. Their aura made the disciples of the palace of 10,000 demons and the Moon clan look at each other. No one actually went to touch them. In fact, the outcome of the battle was already decided. The battle could have lasted for a while, but it ended early because Xianxia quickly killed the 13 Daluo sect disciples who broke out of the encirclement. Yan Wuchen ignored these Daluo sect disciples who were still standing. He held a sword, stepped over the bodies and walked straight to Luo Qingtian. The two looked at each other. Zhu Xianxian, who was half kneeling beside Luo Qingtian, kept bleeding from the corner of his mouth. His intestines kept flowing out from the open wound in his stomach, and he kept stuffing them back. But they kept flowing out. Luo Qingtian looked down at him and said in a deep voice, "Elder Zhu, you are the only living elder of the Daluo sect. Stand up." "Yes, sect master." As soon as xianxia spoke, blood came out of his mouth and his words were unclear. However, he still gritted his teeth and stood up. His body was on the verge of collapse as he looked around. His gaze landed on Xianxia, who was in the air. His eyes immediately widened, and he forcefully spat out a mouthful of blood from his throat. He raised his sword and pointed it at Xianxia. He angrily roared, "Xianxia, I curse you to die a horrible death. Even if I become a ghost, I won't let you go. I won't let you go." Xianxia stared down and said slowly, "Senior Yin, please take his head for me." With a flash of the sword, Zhu Xianxian's head was separated from his body. Yan Wuchen caught the falling head and threw it into the air. Then he kicked Zhu Xianxian's headless body away. Xianxia caught the flying head, looked at it by the hair, and threw it into the storage bag. Yan Wuchen said to Luo Qingtian indifferently, "Luo Qingtian, the Daluo sect will be removed from the cultivation world from today onwards." Luo Qingtian smiled faintly and said, "The 10,000 demons will have this day sooner or later. The Daluo sect is just a step ahead. I will wait for you down there." "Maybe." Yan Wuchen's lips curled into a sly smile. "Even if that day comes, I hope you will remember that you, the Daluo sect master, died under my feet." Luo Qingtian's eyes widened and he shouted angrily, "Old Yan, how dare you!" A disciple of the 10,000 demons dashed over and kicked the back of his knee. He shouted, "Kneel." Luo Qingtian's body swayed and he couldn't stand steadily. He almost knelt down, but he used his sword pillar to support himself. The disciple of the 10,000 demons wanted to continue kicking, but Yan Wuchen waved his hand to stop him. "Forget it, I was just joking with him." The disciple retreated angrily. Luo Qingtian struggled to stand up. Yan Wuchen narrowed his eyes and stared at him. "But everyone in the world will know that the Daluo sect master died in my hands." With a flash of the sword, a bloody wound appeared on Luo Qingtian's neck. There was no blood because the blood in his body was almost drained. His body, which had just stood up, fell backward and lay on the corpse of his fellow disciple. Luo Qingtian struggled to turn his head around. His unfocused eyes wanted to take another look at the Daluo sect, but he saw the disciples of the Daluo sect who would rather die than fall. A gratified smile appeared on his face as he recalled the distant past. At that time, these disciples had just joined the Daluo sect, and he was standing here on the steps of the Lingxiao Hall. He waved at these disciples who had just joined the Daluo sect and shouted in high spirits, "The Daluo sect welcomes you. From today onwards, the second-ranked Daluo sect will be your home. One day you will be proud to join the Daluo sect and the Daluo sect will be proud to have you join." Luo Qingtian's eyes stopped moving completely, but he still had a smile on his face. Yan Wuchen looked in the direction he was looking at. It was the group of Daluo sect disciples who were still standing. He waved his hand and said, "Kill them." Immediately, a group of 10,000 demons rushed out and cut down the Daluo sect disciples who were still standing. Xianxia withdrew his gaze from below and nodded at Zhang Peng. Zhang Peng quickly gestured for the team to retreat. All the masked men in black quickly searched the corpses of the dead disciples. After they were done, they quickly regrouped and fled to the primeval forest at the foot of the mountain. Yan Wuchen's eyes flickered as he stared at these masked men in black who knew when to advance and when to retreat. He had some questions to ask Xianxia, but he recalled how Xianxia killed 13 Daluo sect consecrators in an instant. He had a lingering fear and swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. "Senior Yan." Xianxia stared at the ground and said, "The Daluo sect still has some people on the coast of the East Sea, especially Luo Kuan, Cui Zhaofan, Li Mengbai and Zhu Zhao. If they are left alive they will be a disaster. We must eliminate the root of the problem." Yan Wuchen smiled. The 10,000 demons and the Moon sect have been prepared for this for a long time. From the moment we decided to attack the Daluo sect, we gathered 8 late-stage tribulation-passing experts and a large number of elite disciples to ambush them. The news of the Daluo sect being attacked must have reached the coast of the East Sea. Luo Kuan and the others are probably on their way to help. They might have already fought with us on the way. As for the Daluo sect disciples scattered around, we have already prepared a plan to deal with them. In short, kill them all. That's good. I hope we don't leave any survivors. Xianxia waved his hand and pointed at the ruins of the Daluo sect. He smiled. The battle is over. It's time for your 2 sects to divide the Daluo sect's wealth. I won't disturb you anymore. Enjoy yourselves. Wait. Yan Wuchen stopped Xianxia, who was about to leave. The latter frowned. "Is there anything else, Senior Yan?" Yan Wuchen's expression was solemn. Although we have taken down the Daluo sect this time, the 10,000 demons and the Moon sect have both paid a heavy price. I just want to remind you that I hope you still remember what you promised us. There's no need to doubt that. Everyone knows that I, Yu Qianshou, am a man of my word. I don't need to speak of anything else, but I speak of my word. As soon as he finished speaking, Yu Qianshou cupped his hands towards the crowd below him and said, "Farewell." As soon as he finished speaking, he'd fled towards the primeval forest below the mountain. The domineering Daluo sect had finally fallen. Luoshao Mountain, which originally belonged to the Daluo sect, was now occupied by the disciples of the Moon sect and the 10,000 demons. The disciples of the two sects searched everywhere for the Daluo sect's wealth. After dividing it, the Daluo sect's spiritual stone mine was also waiting for them. According to the previous agreement, the Daluo sect's wealth was divided into 3 equal parts. The Moon sect would get 1 and the 10,000 demons would get 2. Of course, there was a reason for this. The 10,000 demons sent out twice as many people as the Moon sect. It was the same for the experts at the end of the tribulation stage who were responsible for the main attack. Following the principle of more work, more pay, the 10,000 demons should get the lion's share. There was no doubt about that. Although the two sects had paid a heavy price for this battle, they had also gained a lot. The wealth that the Daluo sect had accumulated for thousands of years was not a small number. In the blink of an eye, it had become someone else's wedding dress. When the news of the Daluo sect's disappearance spread, the entire wuxia cultivation world was shocked. Such a big thing couldn't be hidden even if they wanted to. In fact, when the two sects mobilized a large number of people, it attracted the attention of many other sections. It was just that no one expected the two sects to attack the Daluo sect. Even the Daluo sect itself didn't expect this, let alone other sections. For the various sects in the wuxia cultivation world, this was unbelievable, especially for the orthodox sections. No one expected that the Moon sect, which was made up of a group of women and ranked third on the orthodox sects, would collude with the 10,000 demons, who ranked first on the orthodox sects, to attack the Daluo sect and the Daluo sect, which ranked second on the orthodox sects. Then came the news that the Moon sect and the 10,000 demons had joined forces to ambush Luo Kuan and a large number of the Daluo sect's people who had returned from the coast of the East Sea. Led by Luo Kuan, 4 masters were killed. None of the Daluo sect disciples who followed him escaped. All of them died in battle. That wasn't the end. The Daluo sect disciples who were scattered outside were ambushed on the same day. Even the disciples who were doing business in the Wu family and the 100 Flowers Valley couldn't escape. They were lured out and killed. The Daluo sect's businesses outside were all forcibly taken over by the 10,000 demons and the Moon sect. As the saying goes, a centipede dies but it doesn't fall down. The Daluo sect was deeply rooted and had a large number of people. Under such a large-scale purge, many people still escaped. But unexpectedly, the Hong gang and Qing gang, which usually didn't have any conflicts with the large sects, also took action quickly. They hunted down the remaining disciples of the Daluo sect everywhere. Under the joint efforts of the 3 forces, almost all traces of the Daluo sect were wiped out. Chapter 688. Conspiracy. All the sects doubtlessly suspected that this was a conspiracy that had been planned for a long time. Just imagine, the 3 forces joined forces within a day. If it was not a conspiracy, what else could it be? However, the strength of the Daluo sect, which was ranked second on the righteous path, was undeniable. Was the Daluo sect really wiped out in a day? On Mount Luoshao, no one stopped the guests who came from all directions. All the sects sent their competent people to personally verify it. When the people who left passed by the people who came, they all shook their heads at the latter with a sigh. Soon, when the people who came later landed on Mount Luoshao, they understood what the former meant. It was a scene of devastation. The originally majestic 3 main halls had become ruins. The mountain top was dyed dark red with blood. There were corpses everywhere. It was almost impossible to find a place to stand. It made people wonder if this was really the world-famous Daluo sect. Rats crawled among the broken limbs. Flocks of vultures, eagles, and crows were not afraid of the people coming and going at all. They flew away in fright when they saw the people coming, but then they flew back without hesitation. They trampled on the corpses, pecked and tore them apart. This place had become their paradise. There were also vultures, eagles, and crows that came from all directions. They began to peel off piles of white bones. Dongfang Chang'ao was personally ordered by the sect leader to check and verify. He stood on a broken stone tablet. Below the stone tablet was a broken horizontal board. Although he did not read the words on the horizontal board, he could still guess that it was Lingxiao Hall from the broken handwriting. He wanted to find Luo Qingtian's body and bury it. After all, Luo Qingtian was the leader of a sect. Everyone belonged to one of the top sects in the righteous path. There was no reason for his body to be exposed and be trampled by those feathered beasts. However, he could not tell which body was Luo Qingtian's because this place had long been trampled by a group of feathered beasts. He was famous when he was alive, but what about after his death? The smell of blood in the air had yet to disperse, and the gloomy wind had yet to blow it away. It was as if there were countless spirits of the dead wandering around the mountain peak and weeping. Occasionally, someone would fly over, startling the group of feathered beasts. After looking around and confirming that the Origin Immortal sect had indeed been razed to the ground, no one dared to linger. Cupping their fists to Dongfang Chang'eo, they bid their farewells and flew off into the distance. This wasn't a good place to chat. Dongfang Chang'eo stood on top of the broken monolith, looking at those figures who were leaving with an emotionless gaze. At this moment he suddenly thought of Yu Qianqiu's poem that was widely spread among the various countries. His gaze lingered on the clouds and dogs in the distant heaven and earth. He sighed in his heart and slowly recited in a deep tone, riding the sword to traverse the vast heaven and earth, white bones like a mountain of startled birds. The world is like a tide and people are like water. How many people in Jianghu return? How many people in Jianghu will return? The lingering sound lingered on the mountain peak, but the person on the broken tablet was nowhere to be seen. A figure disappeared into the distance. The Origin Immortal sect had been razed to the ground, and the entire cultivation world was in turmoil. The slaughter of the 10,000 demons and the Moon Clan was unanimously criticized by the entire righteous path, especially the Moon Clan. They had become traitors in the eyes of the righteous sects and received the most intense condemnation. The diabolism all remained silent. To them it was a good thing that the righteous path had suffered a heavy blow. However, the 10,000 demons had made such a big move at such a sensitive time when enemies were waiting for them. They didn't dare to flatter them. However, the destruction of the Origin Immortal sect had already become an established fact. Other than condemning them, what else could they do? Would any sect be willing to take revenge for the Origin Immortal sect? To the various sects, only the Origin Immortal sect that was still alive was valuable. The destroyed Origin Immortal sect could only support them on moral grounds and would have nothing to do with them. It was true that the Moon Clan was being condemned, but it had naturally become the second largest sect of the righteous path. At the same time, it had made a fortune that was equivalent to hundreds of years of accumulation for the Moon Clan. Among those condemning sects, how many sects were actually secretly envious of the Moon Clan? Only the victors had the right to establish themselves in the cultivation world. Even if the losers didn't die, it would be difficult for them to establish themselves. This was the reality of the cultivation world. The incessant condemnation stopped abruptly after a piece of news came out. It was said that this time, the 10,000 demons and the Moon Clan had joined forces to destroy the Origin Immortal sect because Yu Qianqiu had taken revenge for An Kuangsung's former master. The entanglement between them had been spread clearly. Perhaps even Hao Sansi himself did not expect that he, who was not famous in the cultivation world when he was alive, would become famous in the cultivation world more than 20 years after his death. Even the righteous sects, including the Fuxian Island, all remained silent. There were even some sects that had been condemning Yu Qianqiu before, but now they suddenly changed their tune and started to praise Yu Qianqiu for how he respected his master, how he endured humiliation to avenge his master, and how he was a role model for the disciples of other sections. As for the victim, the Origin Immortal sect, they were gradually described as greedy villains who killed for treasures. They deserved to be destroyed. In the world of cultivation, strength was always more useful than a glib tongue. History had proven that this was an irrefutable truth. The truth was always on the side of the victors. The Origin Immortal sect would be engraved on the pillar of humiliation, and Yu Qianqiu would be a good disciple who endured humiliation to avenge his master. The internal strife in the cultivation world of wuxia made the sects nervous. They were worried that because of the internal strife, the Wuji Island would take the opportunity to attack. However, what surprised the Wuxia Cultivation Alliance was that the Wuji Island had been very quiet during this time. There wasn't even the slightest sign of provocation. They obediently played their part. This made people feel that they were worried about something or waiting for something. It gave people a feeling of silence before an explosion. In fact, Bai Changchun's reappearance in the cornucopia made the forces of the various countries behave a lot. The old man's terrifying skills made the Soul Formation realm lords of the various countries unforgettable once again. It was better to wait until he went to the East Holy Land. Anyway, the day of the East Holy Land's opening was not far away. There was no need to provoke by Changchun at this time. The wind was bleak, the water was cold, and the warrior was gone, never to return. At the border of the west, war drums thundered and shook the heavens and bugles sounded. Millions of brave soldiers moved, war horses galloped, and the army began to gather in the clouds. The fierce west wind. Beside the tall platform, the commander's flag with the word "Sure" fluttered in the wind. On both sides of the platform, there were 3 large drums that looked like round tables. In front of each drum, there were 2 burly men with bare arms, waving sticks and beating the drums. The 6 drums vibrated at the same time, and the deafening sound pierced through the clouds. Generals quickly came to the front of the platform to receive their orders. On both sides of the platform there were 6 rows of generals, and each row had 20 soldiers. All of them were clad in armor, their faces solemn and murderous. The 6 thunderous drums suddenly stopped, and the rumbling sound echoed in the air. Outside the gate surrounded by high fences, there was a hua-hua sound of armor. Xuanhuan held a long sword at his waist, and walked in with a majestic gait. His armor shone brightly, and the bright red cloak behind him looked like it was dyed with blood. Behind him, there were 2 personal guards following closely behind him. However, there were 2 rows of 6 generals, and a total of 12 generals accompanied him. Xianxia was impressively among them. A line of 15 people walked into the field in an orderly manner. After the 12 generals escorted Xuanhuan to the platform, they scattered to both sides, and stood in front of the 12 rows of generals below the platform. Xuanhuan held his sword and stood in the middle of the platform, looking down with a pair of fierce eyes. The generals who were qualified to stand under the platform were all famous generals of wuxia who had followed him through hundreds of battles. Which one of them didn't climb out of a pile of corpses? But today, greetings, Grand Marshal. More than 100 generals shouted in unison, and their voices reverberated in all directions. All of them knelt down on one knee. Xuanhuan swept his gaze around, and raised his hand to signal everyone to stand up. He then took a deep breath and shouted in a deep voice, "The Li dynasty is cruel and heartless. Corrupt officials run amok and prey on the common people. For the country and the people, we have fought bloody battles at the borders for many years, but in exchange we can't return to our homes. How many people have broken up their families? Although we are brave men, we also care about our country and the world. We hope that the common people can live in peace and prosperity. This is the duty of us iron-blooded soldiers. But we can't survive, and we can't even protect our wives and children. Are we supposed to protect the Li dynasty where treacherous officials and corrupt officials gather? Are we supposed to be loyal to the Li dynasty's imperial power that makes the common people unable to live in peace? No, no, no. The generals and the surrounding soldiers raised their arms and shouted in unison, and their momentum was astonishing. Although my family is reunited now, it's hard to erase the hatred in my heart that I've exchanged for a lifetime of military service. Hatred, hatred, hatred. Xuanhuan cried out in pain. Then he said loudly, "Now I'm willing to repay the people's kindness of raising me with my hot-bloodedness, overthrow the Li dynasty's tyranny and return peace to the world. Are all of you willing to follow Xuanhuan to conquer the world and make new contributions?" With a whoosh, the generals below the stage knelt down on one knee again. They cupped their hands together and shouted, "We're willing to follow the great marshal with our lives. We'll go through fire and water, and we'll do anything to overthrow the Li dynasty's tyranny and return peace to the world." "All right," Xuanhuan shouted, "all generals listen up." Everyone immediately stood up and listened to the orders solemnly. Xuanhuan's gaze swept past everyone and shouted again, "Yanping Wengao, where are you?" 2 generals quickly walked out from the ranks and cupped their fists as they said in unison, "We're here." Unexpectedly, Xuanhuan stared at them coldly from the stage. He waved his hand and said with a sneer, "Tie them up." The 2 generals were dumbfounded. Before they could react, they were immediately pressed to the ground by the ferocious soldiers who rushed out from both sides. Their helmets and swords were taken off and they were tied up. The generals on both sides stood silently and stared coldly at the 2 people tied up on the ground. No one pleaded for them, as if they weren't surprised at all. "Why is the great marshal like this? Did I break any military rules?" The 2 of them struggled and shouted on the ground. Their faces were covered in dirt, and they were forced to kneel on the ground by the ferocious soldiers. "Why ask when you already know the answer?" Xuanhuan stroked his beard and said indifferently with a cold gaze, "Although the two of you have followed me for many years, you're actually spies sent by the Li family to spy on me. In the past, I didn't touch you two because I wanted the Li family to be at ease. Now that the army is about to go on a punitive expedition against the Li family, how can I leave two spies by my side to ruin things? It just so happens that the army is about to go on a punitive expedition and needs human heads as sacrifices. I'll have to trouble the two of you." "Great Marshal, you're being wronged. Marshal, you're being wronged." The two of them struggled and cried out for their innocence. Unfortunately, Xuanhuan didn't even care about them. Instead, he waved his arm and shouted, "Bring them in." There was a commotion outside the gate and hundreds of soldiers who were tied up were pushed in. Chapter 689. All of these people had stones stuffed into their mouths and had hemp ropes covering their mouths. None of them were able to speak. Their faces were filled with fear as they whimpered, as if they wanted to say something. However, Xuanhuan had no intention of listening to what they had to say. All of them were forced to kneel on the ground. Other than the people who held them down, there was also a red-robed executioner with a demon-headed blade standing behind each of them. All the generals looked at these 500 people and knew what was going to happen next. However, none of them did anything. Not a single one of them came out to plead for mercy. This was because they knew that these 500 soldiers were the same as Yan Ping and Wen Gao. They were all spies planted by the imperial court within the army. It was just that their ranks were not as high as the two spies. Usually they were not touched because they did not want to alert the imperial court. But now that the army was about to move out, the Grand Marshal only needed to give the order to capture them all. Looking at this situation, Yan Ping and Wen Gao's face instantly became extremely pale. They understood everything. It seemed that their every move was already in the grasp of the Grand Marshal. Today was the day to capture them all. "Marshal, spare me." Yan Ping struggled to stand up and cried out to the tall and sturdy figure on the stage. Two soldiers raised their thick blades and smashed them on his calf. Kacha. The sound of bones breaking could be heard clearly. Yan Ping let out a painful groan and knelt down again. Wen Gao, who was also struggling, saw this scene and had a desolate expression on his face. He shouted towards the stage, "Marshal! Great General! This subordinate knows his mistake. I beg of you, Great General, for the sake of this subordinate's years of fighting and risking his life for you, please forgive this subordinate this time. This subordinate knows his mistake, Great General." The two soldiers who were holding him immediately swung the backs of their thick swords, directly striking his mouth. With two pa-pa sounds, blood mixed with broken teeth sprayed out. His mouth was immediately badly mutilated, and he could no longer speak loudly. Xuanhuan held onto his sword and stared at the two of them in silence. After a long time he slowly said, "After the two of you die, bless my army from the underworld. Since the two of you have followed me into battle for so many years, when I conquer the world, I will treat your family well in the name of military martyrs who died in battle. Military law is merciless. The merciful do not command soldiers. Xianxia." Xianxia stepped forward and cupped his fists. "Here." Xuanhuan gently waved his hand and said, "Send the two generals on their way for me." "Yes, sir." Xianxia threw off the white robe behind him, turned around and walked towards Yan Ping and Wen Gao, then took over the broadsword from the red-clothed executioner. Xuanhuan stretched out his hand, and someone immediately handed him a red lot. Xuanhuan picked up the red lot with 2 fingers and threw it off the stage. He shouted, "Sacrifice to the flag, cut." Xianxia sends the 2 generals off. Xianxia bowed to Yan Ping and Wen Gao with his saber in his hand. He then walked in between the two and swung his saber left and right. Poo-pew, sounds could be heard as 2 steaming heads fell to the ground. Xianxia's white robe was dyed red by the blood he spat out. Xianxia returned the blade back to the executioner and returned to his position. Soon after, more than 500 saber flashes could be seen. Poo-pew, sounds could be heard as more than 500 heads fell to the ground. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere and the smell of blood filled the air. The generals had been fighting for many years and were used to seeing life and death. These 500 heads did not even have the qualifications to make them frown. In front of the plateau halfway up the mountain, Yu Qianqiu stood quietly under a large tree, calmly looking at the mountain deity temple at the foot of the mountain. The strong sunlight shone on his face, causing his expression to change unpredictably, as if his heart was not as calm as he looked on the surface. The Qin clan and Hong clan now included all the rogue cultivators in the entire Chinese cultivation world. Their members were spread all over China, making them the best place to gather information. Compared to the 100 Charms Enchantress Pink sect, they were much more flexible. Most importantly, these two clans were all under his command, and he could command them as he pleased. It was not like the time when he needed to gather information from the Pink sect. After knowing that Xuanhuan's army was about to make a move, he had been sitting here, receiving all kinds of information from all over the world. Xuanhuan could handle the war, so he didn't need to worry about it. What he paid attention to was the reaction of the various sects in the cultivation world when Xuanhuan's army made a move. To him, there were two battlefields in China. The secular world was Xuanhuan's and the Li dynasty's battlefield. On the other hand, his battlefield was the cultivation world. He didn't allow any sects in the cultivation world to intervene in the secular world's war. Once he found any abnormal signs, he would do his best to put an end to it. Even Fuxian Island couldn't. After struggling, working hard, and going crazy in the cultivation world, he already had enough confidence to make the so-called world's #1 sect, Fuxian Island, shrink back. A figure flashed and landed on the plateau in front of the room. Gu Qingyun strode to the back of Yu Qianqiu, and Yu Qianqiu asked without turning his head, "Is there any new news? Xuanhuan's million-strong army has already made a move." Before Gu Qingyun could finish, Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and looked at him, asking, "How's the situation?" Hong Gang and Qing Gang are paying close attention to the movement. Currently, the various sects in the cultivation world have no reaction, and they seem to be waiting for Fuxian Island's reaction. The strange thing is that Wuxia Empire is Fuxian Island's exclusive property. Xuanhuan revolted, but Fuxian Island has no reaction. "It's a little hard to understand," Gu Qingyun said with a puzzled expression. "There's nothing strange about it. I've already warned Fuxian Island, so they won't dare to act rashly for now." Yu Qianqiu casually said and asked, "How's the situation over at Xuanhuan's side?" Gu Qingyun was a little surprised as he didn't expect him to even dare to warn Fuxian Island. He then said with a smile, "This person is really good at fighting, and his subordinates are all peerless generals who have been through hundreds of battles. In addition to the million-strong elite under him, the imperial court's troops are no match for him. I reckon the Li dynasty is already restless." Yu Qianqiu said with an "oh," and asked with a smile, "What's the situation?" Gu Qingyun explained, "The Wuxia Empire has 6 million troops, and the Zhu State, Wei State and Ping State generals are in charge of one division each. Each division has about 2 million troops. In reality, the movement of Xuanhuan's army had already alerted the imperial court, and they had already ordered the Wei State general in the east to personally lead his army to defend. The Wei State general, on the other hand, did a good job. He led 1.2 million troops, and once he arrived at the west, he sent out 300,000 troops to guard the Black Wind Gap stronghold. This place is easy to defend and hard to attack, so he thought it would be foolproof. Who knew that Xuanhuan had already secretly sent out 50,000 elite troops before he sent out his army? They went through untold hardships and crossed the mountains to lie in ambush behind the stronghold. Once the army neared the Black Wind Gap, Xuanhuan sent his son Xianxia to lead 100,000 troops to attack. They worked together with the 50,000 elite troops that infiltrated the stronghold. In less than a day, they took down the Black Wind Gap and opened up the path to the Central Plains. The people he picked didn't disappoint him, so Yu Qianqiu was more or less relieved. He said with a smile, "All's fair in war, as expected of the famous great General Shi. I didn't expect Xianxia to be the one who made the greatest contribution." Gu Qingyun nodded and continued, "After Xuanhuan took down the Black Wind Gap, he ordered 3 generals to lead 300,000 vanguard troops to attack the main force of the Wei State general from 3 different directions. The remaining 900,000 troops of the Wei State general were utterly defeated, and the Wei State general was no longer in the mood to fight, so he fled in panic. After that, Xuanhuan's 3 vanguard troops advanced with irresistible force. In just a short 10 days they took down 3 residences and 18 cities in the west, completely clearing away all the obstacles in their way to the Central Plains. The next step is to fight the vast land of the Central Plains. The wealth, population and food of the Wuxia Empire will all leave the Central Plains. It would be strange if the Li dynasty is not anxious." Yu Qianqiu laughed heartily. Amidst his happiness he frowned and muttered, "Xuanhuan's offensive is ferocious. I'm afraid it will force some people to take desperate measures. You and Hong Qi must keep a close eye on the movements of the sections. If there's anything wrong, tell me immediately so that I can deal with it." The news of Xuanhuan's rebellion spread throughout the entire Wuxia Empire in no time. The whole of Wuxia was in a state of shock. And within the borders of the whole country, the imperial court began to forcefully recruit a large number of able-bodied men to serve in order to block Xuanhuan's attack. In fact, this was also a last resort. The imperial court would never have thought that the Wei State General, who was equally as famous as the pillar of the State General, could not even withstand the attack of the former for a month. 2 million troops. They were defeated just like that. What else could they do but recruit able-bodied men? From the capital of Wuxia to the rest of the country, all the high-ranking officials and nobles began to panic. This was because these people with vested interests were originally attached to the current regime, absorbing the wealth of the people. Once the regime was overthrown, their good days would come to an end. Not to mention good days, whether or not they would be able to keep their lives in the future was still a problem. It was not like Xianxia's previous world, where once they were full of money, they could easily escape to a foreign country due to special circumstances and continue to live a carefree life. Also, due to some special reasons, no one would really pursue and punish them. So, who cares if your country is good or bad? What can they do to me? What does it have to do with me? Although these people usually lived a luxurious life, they were not as stupid as the pigs in the pigsty. They knew more than the common people. It was fine if the Wuxia Empire's army was used to bully and extort unarmed people. But if they wanted to fight against Xuanhuan's army, which had been fighting bloody battles at the borders for years, that was a joke. It was no different from courting death. For a moment, everyone panicked. In the heavily guarded palace in the capital of Wuxia, His Majesty flew into a rage during the court meeting, scolding the Wei State General for being an idiot. However, throwing a tantrum was one thing, but he still had to think of a solution. Thus he pointed to the Ping State General. As for the Ping State General, he used the excuse that he and his men had to protect the important areas of the capital region, so it was not convenient for him to move out easily. In the end, the flustered and exasperated His Majesty flung his sleeves and left. Then he found the current imperial preceptor and asked the power behind the Li dynasty for help. Chapter 690. They finally made a move. Feng Xiangtian sighed helplessly. The state preceptor of the Wuxia Empire, who was also a disciple of supporting Xian Island, came back to ask for help. In fact, there was no need for him to come back to report. Supporting Xian Island already knew about Xuanhuan's rebellion. Since Yu Qianzhou said it himself, supporting Xian Island had sent people to secretly monitor it. The so-called secret surveillance was to secretly find an opportunity to assassinate Xuanhuan and his son. As long as they did it secretly, even if Yu Qianzhou came looking for supporting Immortal Island, supporting Immortal Island could just push the matter aside and say that they didn't do it and that someone might have deliberately framed them to sow discord. Don't think that the world's #1 sect wouldn't do shady things. With the support of strength, shady things would be even more secretive. However, the people they sent reported that Xuanhuan had many crossing tribulation experts protecting him. The strangest thing was that these crossing tribulation experts were unfamiliar faces. They had never seen them in the Wuxia cultivation world. The higher-ups of Fuxian Island immediately thought of a possibility, which was that Yu Qianzhou had borrowed manpower from another nation's forces. It should be known that the other countries had a lord overseeing them. The lord who could control a territory was basically at the spirit-severing intermediate stage. This wasn't something that supporting Xian Island dared to act recklessly. The spirit-severing experts hadn't come yet. If they attracted them, it would be too late. Thus the assassins were called back. Inside the house, a group of elders of supporting Xian Island gathered. Guan Weiwu lowered his head and didn't say anything. The others glanced at Fernan from time to time. Fernan's current situation in supporting Xian Island was very delicate. Perhaps it was more appropriate to describe it as awkward. If it wasn't for Ma Jiugu's protection, he would have lost his position. We shouldn't have expelled Yu Qianzhou from the sect. At that time he had already displayed outstanding cultivation talent. But what did we do? We are ashamed to face the ancestors of the supporting Immortal Island. Elder Mo of the Equipment Refining Pavilion, who was sitting beside Ferdinand, grumbled softly. Feng Xiangtian glared at him coldly. If he was to be held accountable for expelling Yu Qianzhou from the sect, he, as the sect leader, would have to bear the blame because he was the one who insisted on expelling Yu Qianzhou from the sect. The reason was naturally because Yu Qianzhou, a mere disciple, dared to challenge the prestige of a sect leader like him. Elder Mo's grumbling was no different from blaming him, the sect master. The Cultivation Pavilion's principal elder, O Sihai, immediately shouted, "We are discussing how to deal with this matter, not letting you fart overnight." He came out to smooth things over. Then he looked around and said, This Yu first gathered the 10,000 demons and the Moon Clan to wipe out the Daluo sect. Now he wants to take over the throne in the secular world. What is he trying to do? No one could answer this question. There was a short silence in the room. After a while, Dongfang Chang'eo said slowly, I heard that Yu killed Luo Guang and 13 other masters in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage in the Daluo sect. I don't know if it is true or not. Osihai's face twitched and he said in a low voice, since he can be called the number 1 master below the soul formation stage by the masters in the final phase of the soul formation stage, he must have the ability to do so. Then he asked Feng Xiangtian, sect leader, what do the Tianxin Pavilion's masters think? Feng Xiangtian shook his head slightly and said, what they mean is that they have no opinion on any decision we make. In fact, what Guan Dinghai meant was that if there was no other way they could only bear with it for now and give up this fat piece of meat in the secular world. Although the consecrators had this intention, he couldn't tell the others that the consecrators had also given in. This would damage the dignity of the consecrators. Everyone looked at each other and didn't say it out loud. They already knew what the masters meant. In the end it was Osihai who said, I think it's fine to give up the imperial power in the secular world. Just take it as a stopgap measure. If there is a chance in the future we can take it back. What do you think? It wasn't good to let the old masters take the blame, and it wasn't good to let the sect leader take the blame. As an elder of the cultivation pavilion, his weight was lower than the other two but higher than the others. He was the best candidate to take the blame. This was called knowing one's own limits. Everyone shook their heads and expressed that they had no opinion. Feng Xiangtian heaved a sigh of relief and sighed. Since it is everyone's decision, then let it be. There is no need to send the imperial advisor to the Li dynasty. Bear with it for now and don't have any conflict with Yu Qianqiu. Everyone is dismissed. Go do your own things. The news of Yu Qianqiu wiping out the Daluo sect not only spread throughout the wuxia cultivation world, but also to the various countries. The cultivators of the various countries didn't care about it since it had nothing to do with them. However, they felt that it was in line with that butcher's style. TSK. Wiping out nearly 20,000 disciples, a butcher is a butcher. In the Spirit Fang Valley, in Lu Yanqing's personal alchemy room in the medicine hut, the Allure Beauty and Yen Yu were helping Lu Yanqing organize the various spiritual herbs. Lu Yanqing stood at the side with a solemn expression and looked at the two busy women. Suddenly she said, I have some news about Yu Qianqiu in the wuxia cultivation world. Do you want to hear it? The two women were stunned. After looking at each other, they nodded slightly, indicating that they wanted to hear it. Lu Yanqing immediately frowned and told the two about Yu Qianqiu wiping out the Daluo sect. Yen Yu was shocked. She didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to kill so many people. The Allure Beauty was in a daze for a long time. Her eyes gradually became moist. He had finally avenged her and accomplished what she wanted to do but couldn't. In the bamboo forest of Utopia, Yu Qianqiu quietly appeared in the courtyard. Just as he walked around, he suddenly heard someone ask in the bamboo house, Who is it? Someone lives here? Yu Qianqiu was stunned, but when he saw Shui Qingkong walking out of the house, he suddenly realized that he had almost forgotten that Bai Sujin's uncle was still here. So he smiled and cupped his hands, saying, Senior Shui, are you used to living here? So it's the leader. Shui Qingkong quickly bowed. He had stayed in Utopia for a long time, so he naturally knew Yu Qianqiu's position in Utopia. After standing up, he replied, It's very quiet here. It's a good place to live. I should thank the leader for taking me in. May I know what instructions the leader has for coming here? Yu Qianqiu pointed behind and said, Nothing much. Go to the grave at the back and pay your respects. Shui Qingkong was slightly surprised. He hadn't come to pay his respects for so many years. Why did he suddenly come today? There must be a special reason. Thus he cupped his hands and said, Then I'll go out and take a walk. Please help yourself, leader. Yu Qianqiu smiled and nodded, watching him leave. Then he looked around the quiet bamboo forest and could not help but feel a little emotional. The bamboo forest and bamboo houses here were built by him and by Sujin. Back then, there were only the two of them in the whole of Utopia. After reminiscing for a while, he stepped on the thick bamboo leaves and walked to the back of the bamboo house. The back of the bamboo house was empty, and a grave stood there conspicuously. The surroundings were very clean, and there were new marks on the grave. There was not even a single weed. Clearly someone had cleaned it often. Yu Qianqiu walked to the front of the tombstone, slowly knelt down and kowtowed 3 times. Then he sat on the ground and leaned against the tombstone with a smile, saying, Old man, I haven't come to see you for a long time. Don't be angry. It's not that I forgot or didn't want to see you, but that I didn't avenge you, so I don't have the face to see you. Today I'm here to tell you good news. The Daluo sect was destroyed by me and I killed the person who killed you. Although it took me more than 20 years to avenge you, I finally avenged you, right? Don't nag at me anymore. He raised his hand and took out a head from his storage bag. He raised it and shook it. Old man, do you see this? This is Zhu Xianxian who killed you. I brought his head. Originally, I wanted to use it as a memorial to you, but I think you don't want to see this face, so I might as well just throw it away and save you the trouble. As he spoke, a green flame appeared in his palm, instantly burning the head to ashes. He took out a wine flask, opened the lid and placed it on the ground. Clear wine flowed out, and the fragrance of wine wafted in the surroundings. Old man, it's been a long time since I drank with you. Xianxia also took out a jar of wine and drank it heartily. He leaned against the tombstone and kept muttering to himself, recounting his experiences over the years to the person who had died many years ago. Old man, I haven't drunk with you for a long time. Xianxia also took out a jar of wine and drank it to his heart's content. He leaned against the tombstone and kept muttering to himself, recounting his experiences over the years to the person who had died many years ago. He recounted all the ups and downs he had experienced over the years. He even grumbled about the grievances that outsiders couldn't see, as if he was a child complaining to an adult. Leaning against the tombstone, his expression alternated between excitement, depression, pride, and sobbing. He seemed deranged like a shameless madman. Towards the end he actually started crying. He hugged the wine jar and drank the wine, crying bitterly. His face was covered with water and it was hard to tell if it was wine or tears. He was still drinking the wine and it was a very strong kind of wine. If outsiders were to see this, who would believe that this was the scum of the cultivation world who did all kinds of evil? Who would believe that this was the butcher of the cultivation world who killed people like flies? As the smell of wine filled the air, a bright moon rose above the bamboo forest. He was still muttering weakly. A graceful white figure gently walked over. Under the illumination of the moonlight, Bai Suzhen's gentle and peerless face revealed a pitiful expression as she silently looked at him. Shui Qingkong only came back after dark. She thought that Xianxia must have left, but when she came back she heard him crying bitterly behind her. She was shocked and immediately went to the Misty Palace to inform Bai Suzhen. That was why Bai Suzhen appeared here. In a daze, Xianxia vaguely saw a white-robed person standing in the moonlight. He struggled to open his eyes, and when he saw that it was Bai Suzhen, he immediately woke up. He picked up the wine jar and looked at it. He muttered, "Damn it. It's not easy being a cultivator. I've drunk so much but I can't even get drunk." In the blink of an eye, he returned to his playful and angry self. Chapter 691. The hint of pity on Bai Suzhen's face also disappeared the moment he stood up. A gentle smile appeared on her face as she asked softly, "Why did you come here alone?" "Let me hug you first, then I will tell you." Xianxia revealed a sinister smile. Bai Suzhen pointed at his wet body and shook her head with a faint smile. Then, she gently opened her arms and took the initiative to hug him. Xianxia laughed and pulled her into his arms. He buried his head in her soft neck and enjoyed a deep breath, inhaling the faint fragrance of her body into his lungs. He murmured, "It's so comfortable. Your chest is also very elastic. I will find a chance to peel it off and see." Bai Suzhen also hugged him gently, allowing him to say frivolous words without saying anything. In the bamboo forest under the moonlight, the two tightly hugged each other as if they never wanted to be separated. The only inharmonious scene was the lonely grave on the side. After a long time, Xianxia was so comfortable that he almost fell asleep standing up. Suddenly, he heard Bai Suzhen ask softly in his ear, "Have you come to pay respects to your master?" "Yes." Xianxia was too lazy to reply at this time, so he softly answered through his nose. "Have you avenged your master?" Bai Suzhen asked. "Yes." Xianxia buried his head in her neck, still motionless. "Killed many people?" Bai Suzhen asked hesitantly. Xianxia raised his head and pushed her away. He looked at her face and asked curiously, "How do you know?" Bai Suzhen smiled sweetly and her eyes flashed. She wanted to say that she guessed it from his actions in front of Hao Sanxi's grave, but she changed her words and said in a low voice, "I remember that there are many people in the Daluo sect. If you really took revenge you must have killed many people." Xianxia said in his heart, "Bosom friend." He shrugged his shoulders indifferently and pulled her hand, "Let's go for a walk." Bai Suzhen gently pulled him back and shook her head. It's rare for you to come back. You should go and accompany Chu Pinger. Yu Qianzhou glanced at her and let go of her hand. He took out a jar of wine and popped a small hole near the bottom. The sparkling wine flowed out in a thin stream. He walked to the front of the grave and placed the jug of wine on the tombstone. He chuckled and said, "Old man, I won't accompany you anymore. Drink slowly." The wine flowed down the tombstone. Then, without saying anything, he walked to Bai Suzhen's side and forcefully dragged her away. They walked hand in hand through the bamboo forest and slowly walked forward. They didn't know how long they had walked, but they didn't say a word. After they walked to the lake, they sat down on the grass by the lake. Yu Qianzhou lay down lazily with his head on Bai Suzhen's thigh and looked at the stars in the sky. He didn't know when he took a bite of grass and chewed it. Seeing that he was chewing grass so happily, Bai Suzhen thought of cows eating grass. So she kept pulling out grass and piling it on his stomach until he looked like a big belly woman. She couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. She was playful and kept burying him with grass. Yu Qianzhou was distracted and didn't notice that he was covered with grass. He looked at the countless twinkling stars in the sky, but his mind was thinking about his women. Finally he thought of Yanyu and was slightly startled. He wondered how she and the Enchantress of 100 Charms were doing in the Lingfang Valley. Bai Suzhen also noticed his abnormality and finally asked, "What's wrong?" Yu Qianzhou came back to his senses and immediately found that he was covered with grass. He rolled his eyes and said, "Beauty, are you afraid of being discovered by others, so you want to destroy my body to destroy the evidence?" He reached out his hand to tickle Bai Suzhen's armpit. Bai Suzhen twisted her body and giggled like a silver bell. "No, no." Yu Qianzhou let her go, but he pointed to his face and said with a sinister smile, "Murdering an adulterer is a heinous crime. I punish you by kissing me." What an unreasonable punishment. Let me think about whether I should execute it or not. Bai Suzhen tilted her head and thought for a while. Then she gently lowered her head and slowly pressed her soft red lips on Yu Qianzhou's forehead. She stayed for a while before leaving. Yu Qianzhou smiled proudly and sat up. He said, "I'm leaving. Don't tell others that I've been back." Bai Suzhen looked at him quietly for a while and nodded slightly. Yu Qianzhou let out a self-deprecating laugh, hugged Bai Suzhen's face, and gave her a kiss before vanishing. Bai Suzhen sat alone by the lake for a long time. She looked at the moon in the sky with a gentle smile from time to time and kept fiddling with the pile of grass. Finally, she picked up a pile of grass and sprinkled it all over the sky. Then she slowly rose into the sky and flew through the drifting grass, like Chang'e flying to the moon, towards the misty palace high up in the sky. Xuanhuan Island under the moonlight had a unique charm. The moonlight and starlight were also reflected in the boundless lake, which made people mistakenly think that Xuanhuan Island was floating in the vast sea of stars. It was a beautiful sight. Furong and Ziyi would never get tired of looking at this beautiful scenery. The two girls foolishly laid on the grass by the lake and counted the stars. However, they messed up their count, so they started over again. Their behavior was similar to someone's behavior in a faraway place. On the roof, Bai Changchun stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at the stars in the distance. Nongzhu sat comfortably on the side and said, "Old Bai, you're finally back. I thought you were really going to stay in front of the 9th Netherworld cave. Of all the things you like, why do you like to fight?" Bai Changchun slowly replied, "I've already told the Ghost King outside the 9th Netherworld cave that if there are more people from the underworld coming out from the 9th Netherworld cave, just lead them here. I'll be there anytime." "You're crazy." Nongzhu suddenly stood up. She couldn't be comfortable anymore. She looked around with some lingering fear and said, "You're crazy, you're not afraid. But we can't be compared to you. What if the masters from the underworld suddenly come? Won't we be in trouble?" "Don't worry. As long as someone from the underworld comes out, I'll know in advance. You can also leave in advance." Bai Changchun looked away from the distant starry sky and fell on Furong, who was counting the stars by the lake. He said quietly, "When you leave, remember to take Furong with you to your purple bamboo forest." Hearing the first part of his words, Nongzhu was just relieved. But when she heard the second part, her heart tightened again. She asked suspiciously, "Old Bai, tell me honestly, if there are some top masters from the underworld, are you sure you can defeat them?" Bai Changchun nodded calmly and said, "Yes, I'm not sure. After all, we haven't seen how strong the real masters from the underworld are. But I'm still eager for a fight. The stronger the opponent, the better. It's best if he can force me into a desperate situation. I've been exploring another way of cultivation by myself without any reference. I want to improve my strength, but I don't know where to start. Only when I meet someone stronger than me, the stronger the better. Only when I experience a fight like that with all my strength, I believe I can find a way to improve my strength by leaps and bounds and break through the realm that I've been wanting to touch. Nongju was dumbfounded. She swallowed hard and said, "Your cultivation has reached this level, and there's still a chance to improve by leaps and bounds? Then, what kind of realm is that?" "The Tao. The Tao." Bai Changchun murmured, "The Tao, can be Tao, is not the Tao." Nongju was confused and said with confusion, "What Tao can be Tao and is not the Tao? Old Bai, what are you talking about?" If Yu Qianqiu had heard this, he would have doubted whether Bai Changchun was also a time traveler. The Tao can be Tao but is not the Tao? Isn't it from the Tao Te Ching? Although he couldn't recite the whole Tao Te Ching, he could casually say the first few sentences. Bai Changchun shook his head slowly and said, "I don't know myself. I only feel that I've touched something but I can't understand it clearly. So I need to fight with all my strength. Maybe the enlightenment is only at the moment of the battle. My self-enlightenment cultivation method is different from yours. Once I have an epiphany, my cultivation will reach another realm in a flash." Compared with the previous realm, it's not too much to describe it as like the clouds and mud. Ah. Nongju's mouth was wide open. He even doubted whether he had heard it wrong. Bai Changchun's current cultivation was already terrifying enough. Once he broke through to a new realm, the original horrifying cultivation would be like the mud, while the new realm would be as noble as the clouds. One was in the sky while the other was on the ground. Was there such a huge difference in cultivation? Old Bai, are you kidding? Although Nongju knew that Bai Changchun wouldn't lie, he still couldn't help asking. Bai Changchun didn't pay any more attention to him. He stared at the night sky and murmured to himself, "Maybe the new realm can make me reborn and rebuild my body." Nongju was completely dumbfounded. He looked at Bai Changchun as if he was a monster. Yu Qianqiu suddenly appeared in a hidden call not far from the spirit-fragrant valley. He floated to the top of a large tree at the top of the mountain and looked around. His gaze locked onto a valley with flickering lights. Those lights were not real lights, but the fluorescent stones that were commonly used by cultivators. Obviously, that valley was Lingfang Valley. It was impossible for ordinary people to use fluorescent stones, which were only used by cultivators, in such a deep mountain. The basis of this judgment was a silver ball that was set up by the scouts in Lingfang Valley. He came here to see how the temptress and Yan Yu were doing in Lingfang Valley. The most important reason was that he himself didn't know why, but he wanted to tell the 100 Charms enchantress that he had already avenged his master xianxia. However, he didn't know that the temptress already knew about this. In fact, the two of them had the silver ball that he gave them when they parted at cornucopia. The two of them didn't know the use of this silver ball. In fact, it was given by Yu Qianqiu to make it easier for him to find them. He didn't want to tell them that it was for this reason, so the two of them mistook it as a commemorative item. He had found their location in Utopia, so he could easily appear beside them. However, there were two soul formation experts here, and he was afraid that it would cause some misunderstanding if he appeared too abruptly. After all, it wasn't a good thing to barge into someone's sleeping place in the middle of the night, especially when there was the world's most beautiful woman around. To be honest, ever since Lu Yanqing ruined his plans at cornucopia, he didn't like this self-proclaimed world's most beautiful woman. Using her beauty as capital to ruin other people's plans, what a problem. If you have the ability, show me your true abilities, then I'll be convinced. Chapter 692. His idea was to fly slowly from a distance. With the cultivation of the two spirit-severing experts, it would not be difficult for them to find him. When they met, he would explain his purpose of coming and naturally, there would not be any misunderstanding. Just as he was about to fly towards Lingfang Valley, he suddenly saw a shadow flashing in the light. Yu Qianqiu subconsciously hid in the branches and leaves under his feet. Usually, it was easy to see things clearly in the light from the dark, but it was difficult to see things clearly in the dark from the light. As soon as Yu Qianqiu hid himself, he regretted it. He had been too careful. He had intended to come here openly. If he had been discovered by others while hiding, it would have been strange if others did not think that he had bad intentions. Yu Qianqiu wanted to show himself, but he found that the shadow was flying towards him. So, he decided to hide quietly and held his breath, waiting for the person to leave. He believed that as long as he did not move, it would be difficult for others to find him. The person who flew over did not leave, but landed on the tree where Yu Qianqiu was hiding. It was probably because the tree was too conspicuous. Yu Qianqiu looked up and saw the person above. He suddenly felt relieved. It was none other than his old friend, Third Xen. This old man was in a good mood. He came out to see the scenery so late at night. He really did not have a normal brain. Yu looked at third Xian who was looking around. He was secretly happy and was about to scare him, but he suddenly felt that something was wrong. Look at this old man, why does he feel a little sneaky? What is this old man trying to do? Is he going to have an affair in the middle of the night? Yu face revealed a lewd smile. He was just thinking about it. Based on his understanding of third Xian's forthright character, he would not have an affair. He would only meet his lover openly. Third brother Xian, who was on the treetop, had already flown to the call where he jumped out from. He pushed aside a pile of wormwood and carried out 2 women. He held one in each of his arms and once again looked around furtively. Then he quickly sneaked into the depths of the mountain. Yu hid in the bushes with a dumbfounded expression. He blinked his eyes in disbelief, thinking that his eyes were playing tricks on him. But with the bright moon in the sky, he was sure that third brother Xian had carried out 2 women, and they were 2 young girls. One of them was even wearing a typical white dress. There was no mistaking it. Sure enough, it's hard to know a person's heart. You may know a person's face, but you don't know his heart. What did it mean to appear loyal but have a treacherous heart? That was exactly what this old fellow was talking about. He actually dared to challenge 2 people in the wilderness. Motherf ***, he has character. I have to go and admire him and catch him in the act. Yu rubbed his hands excitedly. He winked and grinned evilly as he dashed out in the direction that third brother Xian had gone. He was afraid of startling third brother Xian, so he was very careful along the way. Along the way he changed into a pure black knight suit. But he found out that third brother Xian was even more careful than him. Third brother Xian would often stop and hide in the dark, watching for any movement. Fortunately Yu was not just a normal kind of sinister in this aspect. When he sensed that something was wrong, he stopped and hid like an experienced spy. The 2 of them acted like spies. Under the moonlight, the terrain was hazy and twisted, undulating. It was difficult for people who were not familiar with the terrain to move freely. Even though he was experienced in sneaking around, he still almost lost third brother Xian a few times. If it wasn't for the fact that third brother Xian's speed was not very fast, it would have been difficult to keep up with him. After all, there was still a gap between their cultivation levels. Most importantly, the woman third brother Xian was carrying was wearing a white dress, which was very eye-catching under the moonlight. That was why he did not lose third brother Xian. Both of them sneaked into the vast mountains. The more Yu followed, the more he felt that something was wrong. His expression became serious. Even if third brother Xian was having an affair, there was no need for him to go so far. He was too careful. Was there a need to go so far into such a remote place? Now it didn't seem like an affair but more like destroying the corpses. With this suspicion, he immediately remembered that the 2 girls seemed to be unconscious. He did not know if they were dead or alive. Yu squinted his eyes and followed even more carefully. He smelled a trace of conspiracy. Another half an hour later, Yu who was following closely behind, saw third brother Xian bring the 2 girls into a valley without hesitation. His heart immediately moved, and his intuition told him that they had arrived at their destination. He carefully sneaked into the dense forest and hid behind a tree where he could roughly see the situation in the valley. Under the moonlight, he could see 70 to 80% of the situation in the valley. It was a triangular valley sandwiched by 3 mountains. There was a stream flowing in the valley. Looking at the pebbles in the valley, it was obvious that it was the dry season of the stream. When the water was full, it could cover the entire bottom of the valley. Because of this, the valley looked very clean, not even weeds could be seen. The pebbles at the bottom of the valley were flat and gray under the moonlight. The 2 girls that third brother Xian brought with him were lying on the ground. Where did third brother Xian go? Yu looked around suspiciously. He did not see third brother Xian return. Could it be that he was hiding somewhere? After waiting and observing for a while, he rubbed his chin and pondered. He felt that third brother Xuanhuan would not leave the two girls here for no reason. His gaze fell on two large rocks in the stream at the foot of the mountain. He then carefully and stealthily slipped down the slope of the mountain. He sneakily snuck behind the bushes beside the stream, and a ball of water surged out of his body and wrapped around his entire body. He then looked around to make sure there was no one around and quickly leaped into the stream. His entire body silently merged into the stream. The stream was not very deep. The deepest part was less than 4 meters. Xianxia quietly scuttled from the bottom of the water to the shadow between the two big rocks. Only then did he pop his head out to observe from the gap between the rocks. At this time, his hiding position was only about 30 meters away from the center of the valley. With his cultivation he could easily see what was happening at the bottom of the valley. He wanted to see what third brother Xian was up to by bringing 2 women here in the middle of the night. Not long after, he found that 3 people came one after another. Each of them had 2 girls in their hands and placed them on the ground. Xianxia did not know these 3 people, but he found that he could not see through their cultivation. It was obvious that they were all higher than him. But from the clothes that they were wearing, he could tell that they were also people of Spirit Fang Valley. The 3 people left the girls in their hands and flew in the same direction. Could it be that it was not third brother Xian who was up to something, but the whole Spirit Fang Valley? Xianxia wanted to go in the direction where those people disappeared. But after thinking about it, he stopped. Since they left the girls here, they would obviously come back here. For safety's sake, it was better to wait here for a while. As he expected, after a while he saw that the 3 people came back from the direction where they disappeared. But each of them was carrying a big basin that was dug out of a whole stone. Xianxia hid in the gap of the shadow of the stone and watched curiously. He did not know what these people were up to. He saw that the 3 people had just placed the 6 basins on the ground when third brother Xian also came over with a basin. And behind him there was also a person. Yanjuashing? Xianxia's eyes widened. He could not believe it. After repeatedly identifying it, he confirmed that it was Yanjuashing, that bastard. He could not believe that third brother Xian was with Yanjuashing. No, it should be said, how could Spirit Fang Valley be with Yanjuashing? Conspiracy, there must be a conspiracy. Xianxia's face was gloomy. That Lu Yanqing did not show her true face all day long. He should have known that she was not a good person. He was so annoyed that he wanted to vomit blood. He sent the Enchantress of 100 Charms and Yan Yu to Spirit Fang Valley. Isn't this sending them to a wolf's den? Yanjuashing slowly walked to the side of the 8 women on the ground. After looking at them, he nodded slightly and said, "You 4 brothers did a good job. When you came, you were not discovered by anyone, right?" "No." The 4 of them bowed together and replied. So these 4 guys were brothers. Sure enough, they were related to Lu Yanqing. Otherwise, how could Yanjuashing instruct her 4 disciples? The most poisonous woman's heart. As Xianxia was gnashing his teeth in hatred, he suddenly saw Yanjuashing give the 4 people a look. Xianxia was on alert. The water under his neck spread up and wrapped his head. He sank into the water and stuck close to the bottom of the stone. The 3 Xian brothers quickly flew to the mountains on 3 sides. They used their eyes and divine sense to scan the area. After confirming that there was nothing suspicious, they returned to report that everything was fine. And Xianxia quietly emerged from the bottom of the water. Not a drop of water could be seen on his head. His body was in the water, but not a drop of water could be seen. This could be considered as a magical thing about cultivating water arts. Yanjuashing instructed the 4 of them to position the 7 basins on the ground, while he shot a beam of black light at 7 of the 8 girls. The 7 girls woke up one after another, but when they saw the surrounding scene, they could not help but scream in fear. As a result, Yanjuashing's eyes suddenly flashed with red light. In an instant, the 7 girls' minds were captured. The 7 girls immediately stood up in a daze. They looked at Yanjuashing and began to take off their clothes with a silly smile. After a while, 7 exquisite white and tender bodies appeared under the bright moonlight. F** King Red-Eye Disease bastard. Xianxia cursed with a twisted expression. He had experienced Yanjuashing's pair of red demon eyes, so he naturally knew its power. But what made him unbearable was that these girls were actually mortals. They were not people of the cultivation world at all. This bastard actually used demonic techniques on mortals and used such despicable means to desecrate mortals. At the same time, what puzzled Xianxia was that he found that Yanjuashing's cultivation was similar to his in the cornucopia, but now he could not see through it. Obviously, Yanjuashing's cultivation had broken through again. Such a godly cultivation speed, coupled with his vicious thoughts and methods, and most importantly, this person was opposing him, so he absolutely could not be allowed to live. Go. Xianxia's eyes narrowed as he sized up the situation. He had already made preparations to launch a sneak attack. Chapter 693. Yanjuashing looked up at the night sky and didn't know what he was looking at. Then he walked to the middle of the 7 stone basins. The 3 brothers of Xan Laosan swept in 4 directions and stood still. At the same time, they looked around vigilantly as if they were guarding. The 7 naked girls walked towards the 7 arranged basins without feeling anything. One of them stepped into a stone basin, sat down, and lay on their side in the basin. Half of the basin was empty, and the other half was full of people. It felt a bit like the Taiji painting. The 7 basins were like plates with good dishes, and the girls inside were the dishes on the plates. Yu looked confused. He didn't know what Yan Zhuixing wanted to do. Under the starry sky, this scene looked like some kind of sacrifice. Did this jealous person want to sacrifice living people? After the 7 girls lay in the stone basin, Yan Zhuixing walked to a basin and took out a pot of 7-star blood orchid from the storage bag. He inserted one hand directly into the flower pot and dug out the blood orchid together with the soil. He carefully placed the empty flower pot outside the pot. Then he took out 6 pots of blood orchid and put them into the remaining 6 stone basins in the same way. When Yu Qianqiu saw the 7 pots of blood orchid, he was so angry that his teeth itched. Obviously, they were the 7 blood orchids that were bought from him. Although these 7 pots of blood orchid had grown very luxuriant, he was sure that they were his. The only thing that made him feel strange was that the flowers of the 7-star blood orchid were all white. Why were these 7 black flowers? He secretly pondered in his heart. It must be this jealous person who used some evil magic. Yan Zhuixing then sat cross-legged in the middle of the arranged stone basin. He looked straight ahead with cold eyes, and his body began to emit bursts of black mist. The black mist gradually spread and became thicker and thicker. It slowly enveloped the area within a radius of 10 meters. Yan Zhuixing's movement couldn't be seen at all. It was much thicker than the black mist released from his body before. Obviously, his demonic skills had made a lot of progress. A rolling black mist suddenly appeared in the valley under the starry sky. This scene looked a little strange, and an abnormal aura spread in all directions. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the water, couldn't help it. Now was a good opportunity. It was a good time to take advantage of the black mist to launch a sneak attack. But in the end he still endured it. He wanted to see what this jealous person was doing. Maybe he could figure out what Lingfang Valley was conspiring with this guy. Suddenly, 7 spots of red light appeared in the black mist, shining and swimming in it. At the same time, the black mist tumbled rapidly and quickly retracted. Yan Zhuixing's seated figure appeared once again. In the blink of an eye, the black mist condensed into 7 balls. The 7 balls tumbled and gradually took shape, forming 7 seemingly solid black snakes. They were black flying snakes. The snake's head flashed and danced around Yan Zhuixing. Yu Qianqiu had never seen such a strange scene before. Just as he was secretly alarmed, he suddenly saw Yan Zhuixing sit still and say, "Go." The 7 black flying snakes bent their bodies and shot into the 7 stone basins with a whoosh, like arrows being shot from a crossbow. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the river, could see the blood splashing out from the 7 basins. His eyes immediately widened and his muscles tightened. He knew that the 7 girls were probably done for. He regretted not making a move earlier, but it was too late now. In order to find out, he bit his lips and resisted the urge to rush out. Because he was not only dealing with Yan Zhuixing, but also Lingfang Valley, who was known for their good reputation. Know yourself and know your enemy and you will never be defeated. He could only comfort himself and suppress the boiling killing intent in his chest. Yu Qianqiu was in a lower position, so he couldn't see what was happening in the basins. 7 bloody holes had appeared on the hearts of the 7 girls in the basins. Blood gushed into the stone basins like a fountain. More and more blood gathered in the basins, and the 7 girls became paler and paler. Their eyes slowly closed and they fell asleep in their own pools of blood, never to open their eyes again. The roots of the 7-star blood orchid were soaked in the blood. It was as if they had absorbed the vitality of the girls and became more beautiful. The 7-star blood orchid had a miraculous effect. The sunflower could automatically correspond to the sun in the sky during the day, and the 7-star blood orchid could automatically correspond to the Big Dipper in the sky at night. In addition, its color was as bright as blood, and the smell it emitted was also the smell of blood, so it was called the 7-star blood orchid. Yu Qianqiu also knew the origin of the 7-star blood orchid's name. However, at this moment, the 7-star blood orchids in the stone basins were showing a miraculous scene. Bathed in the starry sky, the 7 small black flowers were moving slowly, corresponding to the Big Dipper in the night sky. On the hearts of the 7 girls who had died, the black flying snake drilled out of the bloody hole. It wandered in the pool of blood and slowly climbed to the edge of the stone basins. It just happened to circle around with its head and tail facing each other. It raised its head and hissed as if it was waiting for something. Yan Zhuixing, who was sitting quietly, suddenly raised his arms and made a messy and complicated gesture. He shot 7 black lights into the 7 blood orchids, and then he chanted, "The light of the demon god, shine on the 7 stars." remove the light and take its magic. The flower of the blood demon, bloom brightly and the magic of the stars quickly absorb it. As soon as he finished speaking, the 7 small black flowers on the 7-star blood orchid suddenly trembled violently, and the thick smell of blood gradually spread around. After a long time, a majestic and unknown aura suddenly descended from the sky, and the entire valley gave people a very oppressive feeling in an instant. Xianxia, who was hiding in the water, suddenly had a violent and uneasy mood. The light in the valley seemed to be a lot darker in an instant. Looking at the top of the 7 stone basins, there was a gray mist hovering 1 foot above them. It was getting thicker and darker. The 7 black snakes on the stone basins propped up their bodies and stuck their heads into the gray mist to greedily suck. Everything seemed so strange. Xianxia was still observing slowly at first. After waiting for an hour, Xuanhuan, who was sitting cross-legged, didn't move. He just quietly watched the 7 black snakes suck the gray mist with a smile. Oh. Xianxia's pupils suddenly shrank. He found that the 7 black snakes seemed to be slightly bigger than before. He immediately recalled the scene of Xuanhuan's body emitting black mist and condensing into a snake. The doubts in his mind were immediately dispelled, and his thoughts immediately became clear. The snake was originally condensed from the black mist released from Xuanhuan's body. Now the snake was absorbing the gray mist summoned by the evil method to strengthen itself. In other words, Xuanhuan would also become stronger after absorbing the snake back into his body. This might be the secret of Xuanhuan's rapid cultivation increase. After understanding it, Xianxia immediately regretted it. He had sacrificed the lives of the 7 girls in vain. How could he sit back and watch Xuanhuan grow stronger? Voila! Countless black flying swords suddenly rose from the stream and shot out like a torrential downpour. This sudden movement startled the few people present. Xuanhuan even looked back in shock. He was a little dumbfounded to see so many flying swords suddenly emerging. At such a close distance, it was too late to escape. He quickly clapped his palms, and the 7 black snakes that sucked the gray mist quickly flew up and circled in front of him. They were like shields that bounced off the flying swords that were attacking Xuanhuan. Bang bang bang. There was a dense explosion sound on the beach. Although the flying snakes helped Xuanhuan to dodge the attack, the 7-star blood orchids in the 7 stone basins suffered a disaster. Not to mention the blood orchids, even the stone basins were shattered into pieces. My blood demon flower. Xuanhuan hugged his head and let out a shrill scream. He had never been so sad in his life. These 7 basins of blood orchids were the hope of his struggle. They were destroyed just like that. It was equivalent to destroying his hope. It was more painful than taking his life. It was simply heartbreaking. You dog, I can't even kill you like this. There was a curse in the stream. 2 bright small knives appeared in the hands of Xuanhuan and his brothers in an instant. It was similar to a guillotine used to cut herbs. 8 streams of light whizzed toward the place where Xianxia was hiding without hesitation. A figure immediately popped out from behind the stone in the stream, and at the same time, a group of dense black shadows exploded. Xiao xiao, sounds were like rain, and the 8 streams of light that shot over were directly smashed into pieces. The 4 brothers didn't hesitate to rush over and attack the figure that popped up in the air. With their cultivation at the end of the tribulation stage, they arrived in an instant. The figure opened his arms and shouted, "Absorbing Star's great technique." The others didn't know what the Absorbing Star's great technique was, but Xuanhuan could be said to be engraved in his heart. He didn't have time to say anything and could only hurriedly shout, "Run!" He had already teleported back quickly. Maybe he was still worried, so he jumped into the stream to escape. However, the other 3 brothers were not so lucky. They had already entered the range of Xianxia's power. Before they could react, 3 clouds of white mist exploded in the air and rushed into Xianxia's sleeve. The 3 withered corpses fell to the ground with a thud. Xianxia landed firmly on the ground. The black flying swords that he had released earlier flew back from all directions, forming a dense defensive formation around him. Xianxia stared at Xuanhuan, who was holding his head for a long time, and snorted coldly, "Brother Yin, nice to meet you. It hasn't been long since we parted. I didn't expect to meet you here again." Xuanhuan's head popped out of the water. He stared at the 3 withered corpses on the ground and cried in pain, "5th brother, 6th brother, 7th brother." Although he was controlled by Xuanhuan and was loyal to him, he still had a normal mind. As long as it wasn't Xuanhuan's order, he could still distinguish between love and hate. He knew the pain of losing his brother. However, although he was sad, he was subconsciously afraid of Yu Qianqiu and didn't dare to come over. Yan Zhuixing slowly released his hand and raised his head. His eyes that were staring at Yu Qianqiu instantly turned red. He roared angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, it's you." Yu Qianqiu stared at the 7 black flying snakes that were quickly circling and flying to protect Yan Zhuixing. He squinted his eyes and said, "The demonic technique that you cultivate is really something. You can actually block my flying swords. Let's try again." Hundreds of black lights shot out like a torrential rain. Chapter 694. The 7 flying snakes moved like the wind and turned into 7 phantoms. Their speed was unbelievably fast and they were extremely agile. They protected Yan Zhuixing so that not even a drop of water could get through. Dang dang dang, after a series of explosions, Yan Zhuixing didn't move at all and continued to stare at Yu Qianqiu with hatred. "Damn you!" Yu Qianqiu cursed in disbelief. His attack didn't have any effect and the flying sword immediately rolled back to his side to protect him. The 7 flying snakes slowed down as well. They shook their heads and wagged their tails as they wriggled in the air. They looked at Yu Qianqiu with ferocious expressions and their eyes shone with a frightening red light. To be honest, Yu Qianqiu had always been very confident in his black fire flying sword. It was invincible and it had long become his trump card. Until now, most of the experts who had died in his hands had died under the black fire flying sword. He didn't expect to meet his nemesis today, 7 treasures. Yu Qianqiu's eyes revealed a look of envy and he wanted to take them for himself. The flying sword was dead but the 7 flying snakes were alive. Regardless of speed or agility, the flying sword couldn't compare to them. What was rare was that they were very sturdy. Even the sharpness of the black fire flying sword couldn't hurt them at all. Looking at the scene of them growing stronger by devouring them, it seemed like they could even level up and evolve. Damn. However, Yu Qianqiu also knew that he could only envy Yan Zhuixing. These 7 flying snakes weren't real animals that could be tamed. They were formed by Yan Zhuixing's demonic technique. "Yu Qianqiu, you deserve to die 1,000 times." Yan Zhuixing gritted his teeth and spat out word by word. The sound of his bones cracking could be heard. Deserving of 10,000 deaths? Yu Qianqiu's eyes fell on the pools of blood on the ground. Even the girl who was still in a coma was smashed into pieces by his flying sword. His heart slightly tightened and his expression turned cold. He stared at Yan Zhuixing and said in a deep voice, "Last time we didn't decide the winner but you ran away with your tail between your legs. This time don't run away if you have the guts. Let's see who will die first." "Do you really think that I'm afraid of you and will run away?" Yan Zhuixing sneered with a face full of resentment. "I'm only interested in the hero behind you and want to subdue him for my own use. That's why I didn't kill you. I didn't expect you to be so arrogant that even my demonic eyes couldn't control you. Now you've even destroyed 7 of my blood demon flowers. Now that you know my secret, how can I let you leave alive?" Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank. He didn't expect Yan Zhuixing to know that he was related to Hero. But thinking about it, it made sense. Back in the 100 Flowers Valley, he had used Hero to frame the father and son. Others might not know but the person involved must know. It wasn't strange for him to guess that Hero was related to him. Don't brag too early. It's still uncertain who won't leave alive. However, I definitely won't die. Do you believe me? Yu Qianqiu smiled sinisterly. He had Utopia as his final trump card. Even if he couldn't defeat Yan Zhuixing, he was confident that he could escape. Therefore he believed that he wouldn't die. Yan Zhuixing sneered in disdain. "Do you really think that you're the #1 expert below the soul formation stage? You'll naturally believe me after I beat you up." Yu Qianqiu smiled sinisterly. Suddenly he changed the topic and sighed. "On account of us being old friends, I'll tell you a piece of unfortunate news. Your father Yan Bugue really can't come back anymore. Because of your sins he was killed on the Everlasting Island. What a terrible death. Not only was he dismembered into pieces, he was even thrown into the sea to feed the fishes. Brother Yan, you have to hold on." "Nonsense." Yan Zhuixing roared fiercely. A faint murderous aura began to float out from his body. However, looking at his dazed expression, he seemed to have more or less believed it. Thinking about it, he was being hunted by various countries. How could his father, who was with them, have a good ending? Now's the time. Yu Qianqiu raised his brows. Hundreds of flying swords shot out while Yan Zhuixing was dazed. However, the 7 flying snakes that were protecting Yan Zhuixing seemed to have a mind of their own. Without Yan Zhuixing's control, they would automatically protect their master. It danced rapidly and bounced off the incoming flying swords with clanging sounds. Yanjuation came back to his senses and said indifferently, "Is that all you've got? Burn your mother." Yu Qianqiu cursed. The flying swords that he shot out exploded. The surging black flames instantly engulfed Yanjuation and the 7 flying snakes. However, there was no response from the inside. Yu Qianqiu's expression changed. Thinking back to the scene at the saber drawing assembly, he cursed in his heart. This guy really isn't afraid of the black flames. Sure enough, Yanjuaxing's disdainful snort came from the black flames. So that's how it is. It's the same as the broadsword, condensed from fire. It can be considered a mystical technique. It might work against others, but it's useless against me. In the surging black flames, a figure slowly walked out. There were 7 pairs of red lights circling around him. Yanjuaxing calmly walked out of the flames. Coupled with the indifferent expression on his face, he looked like a demon that walked out of hell. Yanjuaxing stood at the edge of the black flames. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and snorted. He slowly opened his arms and took a deep breath. The surging flames quickly rolled over and entered his nostrils and mouth like a whale sucking in water. The most terrifying thing was that his face was filled with a comfortable expression. The 7 flying snakes around him were also greedily sucking the black flames. The netherworld ghost flame actually became their tonic? Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He couldn't let them take advantage of him. He stretched out his palm and the surging sea of flames was quickly retracted into his sleeve. He could clearly feel that it had lessened a lot. Insignificant skill. Yanjuaxing snorted in disdain and said indifferently, "Kill him." The 7 flying snakes shot out without hesitation. Yu Qianqiu naturally wouldn't just sit and wait for death. The flying swords around him immediately danced like a group of demons as they desperately blocked the 7 flying snakes. A series of clanging sounds rang out. The flying snakes weren't afraid of the flying swords that were burning with black flames at all. They shook their heads and wagged their tails as they charged forward with malevolent expressions. Their auras were ferocious and exceptionally valiant. The black flames' flying swords couldn't stop them. It was like scratching an itch on their bodies. It could only slow down their speed. Fuck. This is really troublesome. Yu Qianqiu suddenly had a feeling that he had nowhere to use his strength. These strange flying snakes couldn't be destroyed no matter how he slashed at them. They had a body full of skills, but he couldn't do anything to them. If he couldn't even deal with Yanjuaxing's snakes, what was the point of fighting him? If he was forced to run away by a few snakes, then he would lose a lot of face. Just as he was thinking of a way to deal with them, the 7 flying snakes that were entangled by the flying swords suddenly sped up. They were like arrows that were released from a bow as they quickly launched a surprise attack. Yu Qianqiu was shocked and quickly dodged. Suddenly he felt a tight grip on his wrist. There was a slippery feeling as if he was being strangled by a strong force. He couldn't dodge nimbly anymore. He quickly glanced around and was instantly shocked. He saw a flying snake had already wrapped around one of his arms. It opened its bloody mouth and was about to bite his hand. Right at this moment, his limbs tightened and a huge pressure came from his waist and neck at the same time, almost suffocating him. Yu Qianqiu, today is the day you die. Yanjuaxing's cold laughter echoed in the valley. Just at this moment, the valley suddenly shone with a dazzling green light. The entire valley was dyed in a bright green color. Hiss, hiss. A few shrill hisses echoed in the valley. At the critical moment, Yu Qianqiu, who was about to be bitten by the snakes, suddenly burst out with a ferocious green flame. The 7 flying snakes wrapped around Yu Qianqiu's body immediately emitted intense white smoke. They were shrinking at a visible speed. The flying snakes shook their heads and hissed in pain. They stopped entangling Yu Qianqiu and quickly retreated. In the blink of an eye, they were out of the sea of green flames. They hid beside Yanjuaxing. Their bodies were much weaker. They trembled and looked at the ball of green flames in fear. Someone in the azure flame let out a strange ha sound. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the azure flame, looked at himself in surprise. It seemed that even he didn't dare to believe what he was seeing. He had released the green flames out of instinct to protect himself. He had already made preparations to return to Utopia, but he didn't expect the green flames to have such a miraculous effect. Yu Qianqiu originally thought that even the powerful black fire couldn't deal with the snakes and that he was already at his wit's end. Who knew that the green flames, which were much weaker than black fire, could restrain them? Indeed, everything has a nemesis. How strange. Yu Qianqiu, who was in the green flames, immediately burst out with a strange cackle. He looked no different from a devil or monster, and his laughter was abnormally insolent. The surrounding black flying swords all disappeared into the green flame with a whooshing sound. Then a large number of green flying swords appeared and danced around the floating green flame. It was a breathtaking sight. Yan Zhuoxing looked at the 7 flying snakes in astonishment and revealed a pained expression. Yu Qianzhou's fire made his heart feel like it was being cut by a knife. The flying snakes were connected to his cultivation. If the flying snakes were damaged, it was equivalent to his cultivation being damaged. How could he not feel pained? Yan Zhuoxing, hand over your life. Yu Qianzhou shouted wildly. Now that he had the upper hand, he didn't plan to let Yan Zhuoxing off even though he was just about to escape. He waved his arms and a sky full of green swords rained down. It was as if they wanted to turn the ground into a sieve. The 7 injured flying snakes rushed out to block and protect their master. However, their nemesis was their nemesis. The green flames flying swords weren't as sharp as the black fire flying swords, but they were extremely sharp against them. There was almost no sound. With a whooshing sound, the 7 flying snakes were immediately cut into pieces, like eels being chopped up on a chopping board to be cooked. Yan Zhuoxing was alarmed. He clapped his hands and his body suddenly split into 3 like smoke, dodging the gaps of the green sword rain gently. 3 shadows that were as light as smoke swiftly devoured the snake fragments that were scattered in the air. Immediately after, they spun thousands of times in the rain of green swords, broke free from the net of swords and charged straight at Yu Qianzhou. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.